Chapter 1. The two suns of Venus 6 rose in the sky, peeking through the clouds and illuminating the dense forests below. Lita stood at her easel, painting the lush jungle that stretched out before the front porch of her family's home. She dipped her brush into a pot of yellow paint, capturing the exact shade of the towering stone ruins, remnants of an ancient civilization that thrived before human colonists arrived. Lita sighed, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. The thick, humid air clung to her skin, as oppressive as the expectations that weighed upon her. Today was her 20th birthday, but it brought her no joy. Her grandmother had spent the whole week dropping hints of what was to be expected of her soon. Like all the elders, it was obvious that her grandmother wanted Lita to continue her legacy, but Lita had dreams of escaping the oppressive city, or traveling to other worlds. "The light is perfect today," said Ruth, stepping onto the porch. She peered at the canvas, green eyes tracing the contours of Lita's work. "You've captured the essence of the ruins." A mixture of doubt and frustration welled up within Lita. "I suppose," she murmured, her voice laced with discontent. "But sometimes it feels like no matter how hard I try, it's never good enough." Ruth cocked her head, strands of chestnut hair falling across her face. "You don't sound convinced." She gave Lita's arm an affectionate squeeze. "Come now, sister. You're one of the best painters I know." "Well, being the best isn't good enough for some people," Lita said while tilting her head towards their brick home. "Some of us don't have any value until we've raised 5 kids. Ruth let out a laugh. "5? Aren't you ambitious?" "It was a joke," Lita muttered and turned back to her painting. "There's no way that old cow would pay for so many." "What's this about a cow?" called an elderly voice behind them. Lita's face paled as she turned to see her grandmother standing in the entranceway. Lita's grandmother was a formidable presence, her age etched into the lines on her weathered face. She wore a traditional robe adorned with intricate patterns that symbolized her status as an elder in their community. "Nothing, grandmother," Lita muttered, gaze falling to the ground. Her grandmother's piercing gaze fell upon Lita, lips forming a thin line. "Lita, Ruth, there are matters we need to discuss," she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority. Lita's heart sank as she knew exactly what her grandmother was referring to. "Of course, grandmother," Lita said and obediently placed down her brush. Lita joined her family in the parlor. The room was adorned with elegant tapestries depicting scenes from their planet's history, each thread meticulously woven to create intricate patterns. The floor was covered in colorful mosaics, and soft ambient light emanated from delicate crystal chandeliers, casting a warm glow that added a touch of comfort to the otherwise tense atmosphere. Lita's mother, Cassia, sat gracefully in a high-backed chair. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, a stark contrast to the silver strands that graced her temples. Lita's grandmother stood with her hands clasped before her, back ramrod straight. Lita's stomach nodded. She already knew what the meeting was about, but she didn't want to hear the words from her grandmother's mouth. "Lita, my dear," said her grandmother, "you know how important our legacy is. Our planet relies on the continuation of our bloodline, our ability to bring forth new life." Lita nodded, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her skirt. She had heard those words countless times before, yet they still stung with a sense of confinement. Her grandmother continued, "I have arranged a suitable match, a man who possesses the qualities necessary to ensure the prosperity of our lineage. His name is Adonis, and the 3 of you are to carry on our line." The room seemed to tilt. Lita's hands clenched the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white. She opened her mouth, but the words refused to escape. Ruth's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A match? How thrilling. I've always wondered what it would be like." "All 3 of us?" Lita's voice quivered. "Even mother?" Their grandmother nodded. "Cassia is still young enough to bear children, so she is included as well." "But what if we don't want to?" said Lita. "What if we don't want a new sister? Or some stranger chosen for us?" "Lita," her grandmother snapped, "you're already 20. I've given you more than enough grace." Lita looked to her mother. "You can't seriously be okay with this?" Cassia bit her lip, but remained silent. Lita let out a sigh of frustration. Cassia never stood up against her mother. Lita's frustration and disappointment escalated, fueled by the lack of support from her mother. She couldn't stay in that suffocating atmosphere any longer. "Enough," Lita snapped as she got to her feet. "If you think I'm just going to be handed off to some stranger, then you're wrong." With that, Lita stormed out of the house before her grandmother could say another word. As Lita stepped outside, the twin suns bathed her in their warm glow, casting long shadows among the stone ruins that lay scattered within the jungle. She wandered deeper into the ruins, their ancient stones whispering stories of a time long past. Vines curled around weathered pillars, and moss clung to engraved symbols that held a meaning lost to history. Lita traced her fingers along the intricate carvings, feeling a connection to the souls who had once inhabited this place. Nobody knew what happened to the beings that once resided on Venus 6. They were gone by the time the human colonists arrived. The climate made it difficult to conceive boys, so the planet was almost entirely populated by women. The few men were kept apart in a protected center, their lineages carefully guarded. The bloodlines needed to be tightly managed to prevent any inbreeding. Most men were retired from the program and moved to other work once they reached 40. Resting upon a stone slab for hours, Lita watched as the twin suns gracefully descended beyond the horizon, their radiance fading into twilight. A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. "I thought I'd find you here," her mother said, approaching with a soft smile. Lita let out a sigh, her frustration still lingering. "Why don't you ever stand up to her?" Cassia settled herself on a nearby rock. "Mother may be strict, but she has our best interests at heart." "That's what you always say," Lita muttered, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Cassia's smile remained gentle as she spoke. "I remember when you used to seek solace in these ruins as a child. It will be nice to have the sound of children in our home again." Lita's arms crossed tightly over her chest as she pondered her mother's words. "But what about what I want? Don't I get a say in when I have children, or if I have them at all?" Cassia sighed. She moved closer, reaching out to squeeze Lita's hand in reassurance. "You're young, my dear. It's difficult to fully grasp the privilege and joy that comes with bearing children. I, too, once yearned for adventure, but when I held you in my arms for the first time, everything else faded in comparison." Lita crossed her arms over her chest. Cassia's smile spread, her eyes drifting into a nostalgic haze. "There is nothing quite like feeling a new life grow inside you, and then holding that baby in your arms for the first time. Your heart just expands in ways you never thought possible. I want that for you. I want you to know that kind of love." Lita bit her lip, conflicted. She couldn't deny the longing in her mother's voice, the radiant joy that lit up her face as she spoke of her children. Maybe her family was right. Maybe this was the only way she'd find true purpose and meaning in her life. Lita looked up at her mother. "Fine. But this is my choice, and only because I'm choosing it." Cassia smiled, the suns dancing in her eyes. In order to prevent inbreeding, every match was carefully controlled and closely recorded. The meeting could only take place in the temple, a large imposing stone structure erected in the center of the city. Its giant pillars were adorned in intricate patterns and symbols. Inside, a dimly lit chamber greeted visitors, filled with the scent of incense and the echo of sacred chants. Lita walked through the marble archway, her heart pounding in her chest. She was dressed in a flowing white gown that draped softly around her. "Adonis is 20, her grandmother explained, leading the way. "He possesses exceptional lineage and is highly sought after. I have great confidence in the match." Lita hugged her arms tightly, attempting to quell the mounting anxiety within her. Ruth had already been to the temple the previous day. She came home giggling and gushing about how charming Adonis was, then proceeded to pick out names for her future children. They stopped before a stone door. "This is his room," said her grandmother. "Just relax, it will make everything easier." The attendants, dressed in ceremonial robes, bowed their heads in reverence as Lita's grandmother walked away. One of them stepped forward, a small key in her hand. She unlocked the door, revealing a dimly lit chamber beyond. The air inside the chamber was heavy with the scent of incense, and the soft glow of candlelight danced across the intricately carved walls. Lita's footsteps echoed softly as she entered, her white gown billowing around her. Adonis sat on a bench in the center of the chamber. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with pale skin, blonde hair, and a strong, square jaw. He wore ceremonial garb that left his arms banded in gold, and his piercing blue eyes scanned the room before settling on her. Lita's breath caught. She'd never met a young man before. They were usually kept apart, their lineages closely guarded. "You must be Lita," he said with a smile, his voice like velvet. Lita could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, her gaze instinctively averting the intensity of Adonis' stare. Everything was happening too fast, and she wasn't prepared for this moment. The rush of emotions overwhelmed her, leaving her feeling vulnerable and uncertain. Adonis sensed her unease and approached with gentle steps. "There's no need to be afraid," he said, his voice a soothing melody. "We go only as far as you wish, and no further." Summoning her courage, Lita mustered the strength to meet Adonis' gaze. I'll try to trust you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Adonis nodded, his expression softening. With a gentle touch, he reached out and cupped Lita's cheek, his warmth enveloping her and sending a tingle down her spine. "Trust is everything," he murmured, his voice brimming with sincerity. As Lita's grandmother had instructed, she made an effort to relax. She closed her eyes, taking deep breaths to steady herself, finding solace in the calming scent of incense that filled the air. "It's natural to feel nervous," he whispered, his fingers tracing delicate patterns along her jawline. "We have all the time you need." Lita's mind swirled with a whirlwind of emotions, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and the remnants of her lingering desires for the life she had envisioned. In that moment, the dimly lit chamber seemed to fade away, and all her focus centered on Adonis. They drifted toward each other, drawn by an unspoken understanding. Their lips met in a delicate and lingering kiss, a meeting of warmth and longing that sent a shiver through her. When it ended, she was breathless. Adonis gazed down at her, warmth in his eyes. "Are you certain?" he asked softly. "We need not go on unless you wish it." Lita searched his face, and found only patience there. The choice, for the first time in days, felt like her own. "I'm certain," she whispered. He smiled, and took her hand. The candlelight guttered low, the incense curling through the quiet dark, and the chamber faded gently away around them. Afterward, they lay together in the stillness. The candles burned down to pools of wax, the last of the incense drifting on the air. Adonis rested beside her, his breathing slow and even. "You should lie still for a few moments," he said gently. "They say that it's best." Lita closed her eyes and focused on the quiet warmth of the chamber. They lay in silence for a while, before Adonis rose and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "I hope it worked," he said with a smile, before knocking on the door and patiently waiting for the attendants to answer. "It was nice to meet you, Lita." Lita watched the attendants open the door and lead him away, feeling a strange mix of emotions wash over her. She barely knew Adonis, but she felt connected to him in a way that was difficult to describe. Maybe they would meet again someday, and if she was lucky enough, she would have a beautiful baby to show him. Chapter 2. Lita stared out the window of her room, heart heavy with the news her mother had shared that morning. The results from the doctor were back. Both Kasia and Ruth had fallen pregnant, but Lita had not. Ruth burst into the room, cheeks flushed, a bright grin plastered across her face. "Did you hear the news? I'm pregnant." Lita turned and forced a smile. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news." Though Lita was relieved the pregnancy had taken in her sister and not her, she couldn't ignore the pang of disappointment in her chest. Part of her had hoped for a child with blonde hair and blue eyes. Ruth giggled and hugged Lita tight. "I told Mother that if it's a boy, we'll name him Adonis Jr." She spun around the room, skirt swirling around her ankles. "Just think, in less than a year you'll be an aunt." Lita swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She plastered a smile on her face as Ruth prattled on about nursery colors and baby names. Though she was happy for her sister, she couldn't ignore the ache inside. The life she had dreamed of was slipping through her fingers. Ruth paused, brows knitting together. "What's wrong? Aren't you excited?" Lita shook her head and forced another smile. "Of course, I'm thrilled for you both." No matter the cost to her own happiness, she would support her sister. Family came before all else. Ruth's eyes lit up again. "This will be so fun. It's a shame that it didn't take for you. But at least Mother and I can be pregnant together. I wonder how similar our babies will look." Lita tuned out Ruth's excited chatter and turned back to the window. The suns had set, and Venus 6 was dark once more. She sighed, the glow of the horizon dimming along with her hopes for the future. She knew it was selfish, but she couldn't help but wish that she had a baby to look forward to as well. The following day, Lita trudged wearily down the dusty road toward Iris' house, feeling the sun's relentless heat on her shoulders. She had an overwhelming urge to see her friend, to share the news that weighed heavily on her heart. Iris was the one person who always understood her. Upon reaching the estate, Lita was directed to Iris' room, where she found the young woman lying beneath the covers of her bed, looking pale and exhausted. Iris' long black hair appeared greasy, as if she hadn't bathed in days. "It happened again," Iris uttered as Lita entered the room. Lita's heart tightened. Iris had already suffered 2 losses, each pregnancy lasting no more than a few months. Taking a seat on the edge of the bed, Lita reached for Iris' hand. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. Iris winced. "The healers can't figure out what's wrong. Maybe I'm just not meant to be a mother." A tear rolled down her cheek. "Don't say that," Lita squeezed her hand gently. "You'll be an amazing mother someday. I know it." Iris sniffled. "I wish I had your faith." "So, what's your news? You look like the weight of the world is on your shoulders." Lita hesitated, reluctant to burden Iris in her fragile state. However, she needed her friend's guidance more than ever. "Ruth is pregnant," she whispered. "Mother is too. But not you." Iris' pale eyes revealed understanding. "You were really looking forward to having a baby, weren't you?" Lita's breath caught in her chest, and she fought back tears. "You know me too well." "It's all right," Iris soothed. "I'm here for you. We'll get through this together." Lita took a shaky breath, drawing comfort from her friend. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't burden you with my troubles." "Nonsense." Iris patted her hand. "What are friends for if not to share each other's sorrows?" She sighed. "The truth is, I really thought that this one would take. Everything was going so well. Are you okay?" "Truly? I'm recovering," Iris said quietly. "It was hard, Lita. Harder than the last time." The healers say my body just needs rest. Her voice broke. My mother took care of everything afterward. I couldn't bring myself to. Lita shuddered and held her friend's hand a little tighter. Such losses were common. She'd already heard similar stories from the women around her. Sometimes it takes time to conceive. Iris spoke softly. I needed about 4 attempts last time. Lita bit her lip. Part of her hoped that her grandmother would just be content with 2 pregnancies, but she was also curious about going back to the temple. The process was strange and new, but she couldn't stop thinking about what happened with Adonis. Sometimes when she thought of Adonis, of his easy smile and the warmth of his hands, she felt a flush rise in her cheeks. Are you going to go back? Iris asked. Lita let out a sigh. Perhaps, if grandmother wishes. Lita's heart craved a child, but she was terrified of suffering through a loss like Iris. Lita's grandmother seemed temporarily content with watching Ruth and Kassia's pregnancies progress. Lita helped when she could, but spent most of her days either outside painting or in her room. She didn't want to face the inevitable conversation that she knew was coming. Maybe we should try again with a different man, her grandmother finally murmured during dinner. Theseus has a higher success rate. Lita felt her insides freeze. But it was Ruth who huffed and placed down her fork. No. It should be Adonis, said Ruth. Then our babies will all be sisters. They'll all grow up in this home, their grandmother replied. They'll be raised like sisters. Ruth shook her head. Please, grandmother. Please let it be Adonis. I'll feel so much happier about this pregnancy if our children all have the same father. Their grandmother let out a sigh of defeat. Fine. I'll put in a request for Adonis, she said without even looking at Lita. Lita stepped into the dimly lit interior of the temple, her senses met by the musky scent of incense and the hush of the sacred chamber. The idea of coming back filled her with nerves, but her heart also beat with excitement. She couldn't deny that she looked forward to seeing Adonis again. She was led to a different room, decorated with various stone statues of gods, as though the deities could help with conception. Adonis was standing before a stone altar, clad in loose black trousers, the candlelight tracing the lines of his back and shoulders. Adonis turned at the sound of her footsteps, and Lita's breath caught in her throat. His rugged, handsome features were as compelling as she remembered, all sharp angles and planes, from the jut of his stubbled jaw to the intense blue eyes that gazed at her. A thrill of excitement and nerves shot through her as those eyes met hers. She wore a thin white gown, and under the warmth of his gaze she felt her cheeks flush. Lita, right? He said, his voice a husky rumble. He took a step toward her, then another, closing the distance between them. Lita stood her ground, pulse racing. You remember me? A slow, warm smile curved his lips. Of course. He reached out and traced a finger along her jaw, sparks dancing in the wake of his touch. How could I forget you? She grasped his wrist, holding his hand in place against her cheek. Thank you, she breathed, hardly recognizing the longing in her own voice. Thank you for remembering me. She had come seeking a child, but in that moment, she wanted only to be close to him again, to feel less alone. Tonight, all else could wait. She would let herself be carried by whatever this was, and by the man who had awakened something in her she had never known. Adonis slid his hand into her hair, grasping the silken strands. He dipped his head, breath warm against her ear. Did you miss me? She felt her heart quicken. Yes, she whispered. Just a little. A low sound rumbled in his chest. He drew her into a soft kiss, and she melted against him, twining her arms around his neck to pull him closer. It felt like madness, but she didn't want to stop. She wanted only to be closer, to lose herself in the warmth of him. He drew back just far enough to cup her face in both hands, and for a moment they did nothing but look at one another. Are you certain? He murmured. She answered by drawing him back to her, and the candlelight guttered low around them. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the quiet, his arm around her, her head resting against his chest. Lita's heart swelled nearly to bursting, overwhelmed by the emotions swirling inside her. She had never imagined that being with someone could feel like this, an intimate closeness between two people who, for a few hours, belonged only to each other. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long receded, filled with Adonis' presence, his warmth, his affection. The word rose unbidden in her mind, and for once she did not push it away. Perhaps it was too soon, too fast, but in this moment, she could no more deny the truth of her feelings than she could stop the suns from rising. Adonis shifted, lifting his head to meet her gaze. The depth of emotion in his eyes stole her breath. Lita, he said softly. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away the dampness she hadn't realized was there. You're so lovely. Joy flooded her, sharp and bright as the twin suns overhead. She leaned into his touch, covering his hand with her own. As are you, she whispered. They stayed together through the evening, talking softly between long, comfortable silences, trading small pieces of themselves in the candlelit dark. For the first time in as long as she could remember, the future did not feel like a cage. As exhaustion finally pulled at her, safe in the warmth of him, Lita drifted toward sleep, wondering what other things Adonis might teach her about a world she was only beginning to understand. Chapter 3. The temple's stone walls were lit by flickering torches, casting dancing shadows over the sparse furniture. An earthy, musky scent of sandalwood incense hung in the air. Lita entered the chamber, her white dress flowing around her ankles. She walked with purpose, though her embarrassment was evident in the downturn of her lips. She hadn't become pregnant again. While Ruth and her mother flaunted their growing stomachs, Lita remained the same. Her monthly cycle came as usual, carrying away her hopes for a child along with it. It was devastating, but it meant that she could meet Adonis again. Lita entered his room to find the young man sitting on a simple chair by the wall, glancing out the small glass window to the world outside. A spark of excitement ignited within her. His charismatic smile and kind eyes had a way of easing her worries. "You've returned," Adonis said as he turned to face her. He uncurled from his position and strode toward her, movements fluid and graceful. Heat blossomed under Lita's skin, but her gaze fell to the floor. The pregnancy didn't take hold this time either. Adonis paused, concern etching lines on his forehead. "I'm sorry to hear that, Lita." Lita sighed, shaking off her disappointment. "It's not your fault. The healers say it can take several tries before it happens. But that doesn't make it any easier." He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. "We will keep trying." Warmth pulsed through Lita at his touch and his promise. "Yes," she whispered. "We will." Adonis's eyes softened. "Come," he murmured, leading her toward the bed. "Let me take your mind off your worries for a while." Lita settled onto the sheets, her heart racing, and let herself believe, for a little while, that she was here for no reason other than to be near him. The torchlight guttered low, and the world beyond the chamber slipped away. They lay together for long moments, their breathing slowing in the quiet. Adonis pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. Lita curled into his side, resting her head on his chest. His heart thudded under her ear, as strong and steady as always. She traced a finger over a livid bruise marring his cheek. A silent question. Adonis sighed, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Just a disagreement with one of the guards. Nothing to worry about." His lips twisted into a weak smile. Lita frowned, disliking the evasion in his tone. She wouldn't pry, but she made a mental note to keep an eye out. "There's no need to frown so, little bird," Adonis chided gently, tilting her chin up to meet her gaze. "All is well. I'm here with you, and that's all that matters." His eyes were warm and open, and Lita found herself believing him. She stretched up to brush her mouth over his. In this moment, she wanted nothing more than to stay in his arms forever. The clinic was dimly lit, the walls a sickly shade of green that did nothing to soothe Lita's nerves. Ancient equipment hummed and beeped, monitors flickering as the doctor inserted a needle into Iris' arm. Lita's friend winced, squeezing Lita's hand. Her palm was clammy, and Lita gave her fingers a reassuring squeeze back. "It'll be over soon," Lita murmured. Iris' eyes watered. She blinked rapidly, sniffling. "What if it's not good news again?" Her voice trembled. "I can't lose another baby, Lita. I just can't." Lita brushed a strand of black hair from Iris' forehead. "The doctor said your hormone levels looked good last time. Just stay positive." But Lita couldn't ignore the knot of anxiety twisting in her own stomach. She wanted this for Iris so badly. Iris took a shaky breath as a vial of her blood was drawn. Lita kept her gaze fixed on her friend's face, willing her to stay calm. "You're going to be a mother," she thought fiercely. "This child will live and grow inside you, and then you'll hold your baby in your arms." The doctor withdrew the needle and pressed a cotton ball to Iris' arm. "All done. The results will be ready soon. Try to relax until then." Iris nodded jerkily. As the doctor left, Iris burst into tears. Lita wrapped her arms around Iris, holding her close. "Shh," she soothed. "It's going to be okay." She kissed the top of Iris' head, a surge of protectiveness sweeping through her. Whatever the results, she would be there for her friend. Always. Iris' mother flipped through a book in the corner of the room, occasionally letting out a sigh. She had been to enough appointments in the past 2 years to have long lost interest. The doctor popped her head back in the room. "Helena, may I see you for a moment?" Iris' mother rose from her seat in the corner and followed the doctor into the hallway. Lita watched them go, her stomach knotting with dread. What if this baby had the same problem as Iris' other children? What if it was something else? What if... "Go," Iris hissed, tilting her head towards the hallway. Lita quietly followed after Iris' mother and the doctor. The doctor was speaking in a low voice as Lita slipped into the hallway. "The tests show that it's a boy again." Iris' mother solemnly nodded. "I see. A boy?" said Lita. The doctor and Iris' mother spun to face Lita like they hadn't noticed her there. "A boy?" called Iris as she peeked her head out of the examination room. Iris' mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll need to end it," she said to the doctor. Iris reeled back as if struck. "What? No, don't be foolish," her mother snapped. "You know the problems we've had with male children. It's too risky to carry this pregnancy to term." Iris' hands curled into fists at her sides. "I don't care about the risks. I want this baby. There's no sense in throwing away your health on a boy," her mother said impatiently, "only to have him taken away. It's better to try again for a girl." "I won't do it," Iris shrieked. "I won't lose him. This is my child, and I'm keeping him, no matter what you say." "You're being ridiculous," her mother snapped. "Why waste months on a child who will only be raised in the temple?" Tears streamed down Iris' cheeks. "I've lost too many babies already. I won't lose this one too. If it's meant to be, I'll have a girl next time. But I'm keeping this child, because he's mine, and I love him with all my heart already." Iris' mother frowned, but for the first time Lita saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You can't seriously." "I can, and I will," Iris said fiercely. "Now get out, and don't say another word about this, or I swear I'll go live in the jungle like a hermit." Her mother's mouth snapped shut. With a swish of skirts, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the clinic. Iris collapsed into Lita's arms, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I won't give him up. I won't." Lita held her close, brushing the tears from her cheeks. I know. Lita would be there to support Iris, every step of the way, even if she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Some days later, Lita returned to the temple, and Adonis welcomed her with the easy warmth she had come to crave. He drew her close, his hands gentle, murmuring softly against her hair, and for a while she let herself forget everything beyond the circle of his arms. The torches burned low, and the chamber faded away around them. Afterward, Lita lay in the quiet, a deep sense of peace settling over her as Adonis traced lazy circles on her arm. Adonis stirred against her, brushing a soft kiss over her jaw. "You're smiling," he observed. Lita hummed, tilting her head toward him. "I didn't realize it was so obvious. On you, everything is obvious." He shifted to brace himself on one elbow, gazing down at her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Your joy, your sorrow, your hopes." A calloused finger traced the curve of her cheek. "I would know them all, if we had the chance." Heat flooded Lita's face, though whether from embarrassment or happiness she couldn't say. No one had ever spoken to her so, as though her every thought and feeling was something to be treasured. She wet her lips, searching for words that seemed to slip through her grasp. Before she could find them, Adonis bent to steal a soft kiss, banishing all thoughts but the warmth of his lips on hers. By the time he pulled away, Lita could scarcely remember her own name. She only knew the comfort of his embrace and the devotion in his eyes, as deep and endless as the night sky. They stayed together a while longer, wrapped in an easy quiet, Adonis tracing lazy circles on her skin. She smiled up at him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. A thought surfaced in her mind, one she had pushed aside more than once that evening. Adonis, those bruises. His face shuddered, smile fading. Lita caught his hand, threading their fingers together. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't wish to, but I want you to know that you can trust me." Adonis was silent for a long moment. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with," he said at last, though there was a roughness to his tone. Lita pursed her lips, sensing there were depths to Adonis she had yet to witness. But she would not press him further. "Not tonight. As you say." She placed a gentle kiss to his knuckles. "I should be getting home before they begin to worry." Adonis nodded, though reluctance flickered in his eyes. "Perhaps we'll meet again?" "Yes," Lita whispered, stealing one last kiss before rising from the bed. "Perhaps." She gathered her things, cheeks still flushed, anticipation simmering in her veins at the thought of being with him again. Whatever mysteries still lingered around Adonis, she knew one thing for certain. She was falling deeper under his spell with each passing day. Chapter 4. The polished silverware clinked against the crystal glasses as Lita gazed around the dining room. Crimson drapes obscured the windows, barely allowing streams of golden light to filter through. The wooden table stretched the length of the room, adorned with candles that cast flickering shadows over the faces of her family. Lita sighed, smoothing the folds of her dress. Her sister Ruth babbled about the life growing in her womb while their mother Cassia nodded along, her pale features pinched. Across from them, Grandmother Eudora presided at the head of the table, sharp eyes gazing over them. Lita swallowed hard, heat prickling across her skin. She longed to flee from their suffocating expectations, to lose herself in Adonis' company. Her heart quickened at the thought of him, of his easy smile and the warmth of his arms. "Lita." Eudora's sharp tone jerked her from her reverie. "Have you been listening at all?" "Of course, Grandmother." Lita ducked her head, hoping the veil of her long ebony hair would hide the blush staining her cheeks. She couldn't very well tell them her thoughts. Ruth was just discussing the baby's progress. Eudora's gaze bored into her. And what else did she say? Lita's mind raced. The baby is healthy, growing stronger each day. Ruth beamed across the table. Yes, exactly. I was telling Mother how active the baby has become. Moving all the time now. Lita released a slow breath as Eudora transferred her scrutiny to Ruth. Lita gazed out the window at the rust-colored sky, shadows lengthening across the horizon. What was Adonis doing now? Was he with another woman? Was he at the mercy of whoever gave him those bruises? Grandmother, said Lita, there is something that I'd like to discuss. Eudora looked up from her plate. Oh? And what would that be? Lita nervously clasped her hands in her lap. I wish to apprentice at the temple, to study the spiritual arts and strengthen my devotion so that I might be better prepared for the trials of motherhood. The temple? Eudora's brows rose in surprise. That is not a path we have ever considered for you. I know, but I've noticed that a lot of the art is in need of repair. Perhaps they could benefit from a painter. Eudora was silent for a long moment, scrutinizing Lita as if trying to peel back her thoughts. Lita sat motionless, hardly daring to breathe. Then, at long last, her grandmother sighed and nodded. Very well. If you feel you have a calling to the spiritual life, I will not stand in your way. But her eyes narrowed. Do not take this as an excuse to shirk your responsibilities. Lita, you're also needed here to help with your mother and sister. Joy and relief flooded Lita, though she was careful to temper her expression. Of course, grandmother. Thank you for your blessing. Eudora nodded and returned to her food, apparently satisfied. Lita bit her lower lip to prevent a smile from breaking out across her face. The next morning, Lita made her way to the temple, eager to begin her work. The head priestess greeted her warmly and showed her to the mural she would be restoring. Lita gasped. The mural was enormous, over 30 feet across, depicting a lush jungle scene from the ancient civilization. But time had taken its toll. The paint was faded and peeling, covered in grime and stains. Entire sections were missing where the plaster had crumbled away. Quite a task, the priestess said. But we are fortunate to have an artist of your skill. Do what you can to restore it. She left Lita to her work. Lita stepped closer, running her hands over the ancient paint, feeling the ridges and valleys where brushstrokes had layered color over color. She felt a surge of purpose and determination. She would restore it to its former glory. Lita set to work, cleaning and patching the crumbling stone, then beginning the long process of color matching and repainting. It was painstaking but calming work, and as she painted, her thoughts wandered to Adonis. She wondered what he was doing, if he thought of her as often as she thought of him. She smiled, remembering their last meeting. Warmth flooded her at the memory of his embrace, his kiss, the quiet comfort of his company. Several women in long white dresses entered the hallway, their excited chatter echoing off the stone walls. One of them playfully shoved her friend, giggling. Did you see? Adonis is booked out again today. Her friend laughed back. I heard he's already been matched with 10 women this week. Did you see how he looked at me? I could hardly breathe. He has that effect, her companion said with a sigh. I swear, that man was made for this. Lita looked away, blinking back tears. She had known, of course, that she wasn't special to Adonis. Not really. But seeing the evidence so plainly before her eyes made the truth harder to ignore. She was just another name on a long list to that man. Lita felt like a fool. She should have just stayed at home instead of sneakily making up an excuse to see him. Lita gritted her teeth, picking up her paintbrush again. She attacked the canvas with angry, jagged strokes, the once serene landscape taking on a distorted, shadowy cast. Let them have their fun with him, she thought fiercely. She would continue to work on her art, the one thing that was truly hers alone. A sudden commotion at the temple entrance drew her from her brooding thoughts. Lita glanced over to see a young man being led inside by a group of women dressed all in black, their faces obscured behind gauzy veils. The man struggled against their grip, desperation etched into every line of his body. Please, I don't want this, he said, voice ragged with panic. Please don't do this. The women paid him no heed, their pace steady and implacable as they dragged him toward the inner sanctum. Lita stared after them, a chill running down her spine. She had heard whispers of men who resisted the temple's purpose, but never seen it with her own eyes. From somewhere beyond the inner doors came the sounds of a struggle, sharp and frightening, and then the guards raised voices. Lita flinched, her stomach turning, as the commotion was abruptly silenced and the man was carried away down the corridor, limp and unresisting between them. Lita couldn't shake the image from her mind as she returned home that evening. The temple was supposed to be a place of peace, but what she had glimpsed shattered all the illusions she once held. She couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden within those walls. Lita had been taught that men were precious and needed to be kept in the temple for their own safety. They would be well looked after and have all their needs attended to. But what she had witnessed made Lita begin to doubt the elder's words. If things were so wonderful for the men, then why did they need to be so tightly controlled? Perhaps Adonis could give her those answers. Lita hurried through the temple's arched entranceway for her next appointment, her sandals slapping against the polished stone floor. At the end of a long, dimly lit hall, she found Adonis' room. The guards unlocked the door and allowed Lita to pass. Inside, Adonis was reclining on a pile of silk cushions, reading from an old leather-bound book. He looked up at the sound of her approaching footsteps, a slow smile spreading across his handsome face. "I did not expect to see you again so soon." His voice was like velvet, soft and rich. It was easy to fall under his spell, to allow him into her arms like nothing was wrong. But Lita steeled her nerves. Adonis had never given her cause to fear him. If she couldn't confide in him, then who? "Adonis, there's something I must tell you," she began hesitantly. He moved forwards towards her, taking hold of Lita's forearms and pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You can tell me anything, Lita. You know I will keep your confidence." His gentle reassurance gave Lita the courage to continue. "The other day, I saw a man dragged in and beaten. It was so brutal, but the guards didn't seem to care." She shuddered at the memory of the man's agonized cries. "It was horrifying. I don't understand why they would do such a thing." Adonis tensed, his arms tightening around her reflexively. His heart raced under her palm. But when he spoke, his tone remained calm and even. "The guards keep the order of the temple. We must trust that they have their reasons for such actions, even if we do not always understand them." Lita frowned. How can such brutality be justified? "I won't believe that the elders would condone such senseless violence. There must be more to it than that." She searched his eyes imploringly. "Tell me the truth, Adonis. I know there are things about the temple you have not shared with me. I want to understand." Adonis averted his gaze, a shadow of anguish flickering across his face. But a moment later his expression smoothed into one of polite detachment. "I apologize, but I do not know anything more than what I have already told you regarding the temple's practices." Lita's heart sank. He was lying. She didn't know how she knew, only that in that instant she felt a chasm open up between them, a breach of trust she wasn't sure could be mended. Her voice trembled with hurt and disappointment. "For a man so charming, you're a terrible liar." Adonis turned to face her fully, his composure slipping. "You're right. I have not been truthful with you, and for that I am sorry. The truth is," he faltered, looking away again as his jaw clenched. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. "The truth is I have never left this temple. I was born here, and have lived my entire life within these walls." Lita stared at him, stunned. "What? How is that possible? You've never once stepped outside?" Adonis shook his head. "I am a prisoner here, in a manner of speaking. My purpose is to father the children of the women who come to the temple seeking new life." Lita recoiled in shock and horror. "No," she whispered. "That can't be." Her mind reeled as fragments of information slid into place, forming a picture too terrible to behold. She grasped at straws, trying in vain to make sense of it. "But I've seen men in the city. Those men have been altered, so they can never father children. But men like me have never left the temple," Adonis said softly. "I am kept here under guard and brought to the women at the appointed times to do my duty." His eyes shone with anguish and shame. "I am little more than a stud animal to the priests. My life has no other purpose." Lita stared at him, appalled at this revelation and the realization that she had been cruelly deceived. Her heart ached for the man before her, condemned to a life of isolation and captivity against his will. She reached for his hand and clasped it firmly in her own, meeting his gaze with fierce determination. "I will find a way to free you from this place, Adonis. The priests will not keep you prisoner here any longer." Adonis gazed at her with wonder and doubt. "How could you possibly do such a thing?" "The priests guard me closely and allow no one to interfere." Lita lifted her chin, her eyes gleaming with purpose. "There must be a weakness we can exploit. A time when you are less guarded, a way to distract the priests. I will find it." She squeezed his hand tighter. "You have suffered enough at their hands. I mean to see you freed, so you can live the life you choose." A spark of hope lit in Adonis' eyes, quickly dimmed by apprehension. "It is too dangerous. If you are caught, the priests will." "Let me worry about the danger," Lita insisted. "You have given me more joy than I ever dreamed I would know. Now I aim to give you your freedom in return." She leaned close and kissed him, soft and slow. "Trust in me, Adonis. Have faith that I will find a way." Adonis gazed at her for a long moment, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes. At last he nodded, a tentative smile curving his lips. "Very well. I will put my trust in you." He pulled her close and kissed her, hope and relief and longing mingling until they were indistinguishable. She surrendered to the warmth of his touch and the quiet safety of his arms. "We don't have to," Lita said softly between kisses. "I don't want to be like the guards, taking what isn't freely given." "They'll know," Adonis murmured. "They always check the sheets." Lita nodded. She'd do what she needed to protect him, and in truth there was nowhere else she wished to be. She drew him back to her, and the last light of the twin suns sank below the horizon, shrouding the room in gentle darkness. For a long while afterward they lay breathless in each other's arms, their hearts pounding as one. Lita smiled, already aching for the next time they would be together like this. The next time she would lose herself in Adonis' embrace, because she would do all that she could to free him. Chapter 5. The soft, muted glow of Venus 6's three moons filtered through the sheer curtains, casting ethereal shadows on the walls of Lita's bedroom. The walls themselves were adorned with her own paintings of swirling galaxies and celestial bodies, each brushstroke an expression of her passion for the unknown. Lita lay on her side, gazing at one of her paintings as if seeking answers. Her heart was torn between the strict expectations of her grandmother and her own impossible desires. How could she save him? How could she free Adonis from the heavily guarded temple? As she pondered her situation, Adonis emerged in her thoughts, his gentle eyes, his polite demeanor, and the way he had ignited something within her that she hadn't known existed. Is it right to want him so badly? She thought, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the pattern of the sheets. How do I ignore these feelings inside me? Her mind drifted back to her recent encounters with Adonis, the way his strong hands had held her, the warmth of his company, the taste of his lips. Images of him flickered through her memory like scenes from a forbidden dream. "Adonis," she murmured, imagining his melodious voice whispering words of affection in her ear. Lita's cheeks flushed as she let the fantasy carry her, picturing him there beside her, picturing a life where she was free to simply love him. For a long while she lay tangled in the sheets and her own longing, aching for a man she wasn't allowed to want. At last the longing ebbed, leaving her quiet and a little hollow. The thoughts that had swirled in her mind mere moments ago now seemed distant and unimportant. A sharp knock rattled her door. "Lita? Are you awake?" Lita jerked upright, yanking a sheet over herself as her grandmother entered. Eudora's shrewd gaze swept over Lita's flushed face and disheveled sheets, but she said nothing of it. "I have great news," she pronounced. "A letter from the doctor arrived this evening. You're with child." It felt like the bottom suddenly dropped from Lita's stomach. "Eh, already?" she stuttered. "Are you sure?" "The tests received a positive result." Eudora settled on the edge of the bed. "You must not go to the temple tomorrow, or any day after. You need to rest now, and protect the babe." "But I promised Adon, the priestess, that I'd finish the painting," Lita said, trying to keep her voice steady. She couldn't abandon him now, not when she promised that she would free him. Eudora's face hardened. "The temple is not your concern anymore. A pregnant woman has no reason to be there." She stood, the conversation clearly over. "Do not disappoint us, Lita." The door clicked shut, and Lita collapsed back onto her bed, tears threatening to slide down her cheeks. She was trapped, torn between her longing for Adonis and her obligation to her child. Would he ever forgive her? The night was painted in 1,000 shades of darkness as Lita made her way through the dense forest, guided by the flickering light of the bonfire up ahead. "Grandmother will kill us if she finds out," Lita muttered to Ruth, crossing her arms over her chest. "Relax, sister," said Ruth, her steps more awkward due to her growing stomach. "All you do is spend all day hiding in your room with those paints. You need to unwind every once in a while. If we're caught, you're getting all the blame." Ruth sighed and rolled her eyes. The party was in full swing when they arrived, laughter and music mingling with the crackle of the fire and the rustling leaves. Young women gathered around the blazing inferno, their faces illuminated by its warm glow, sipping on wine from glass bottles with abandon. The atmosphere was intoxicating, and for a moment, Lita forgot about her promise to Adonis and the ever-growing weight of her pregnancy. "Ah, there you are," Iris called out, spotting Lita approaching. She was sitting on a fallen log beside Zoe, a dark-haired woman who they went to school with. "Better late than never," Ruth replied with a smile. "Have some wine," Zoe urged, offering Lita a half-empty bottle. "You look like you could use it." Lita hesitated, her hand instinctively moving to cradle her still flat belly. "I shouldn't," she said softly. "For the baby?" "Right, of course," Zoe muttered, taking a swig from the bottle herself. "How is that going, by the way?" "You must be thrilled." "Thrilled," Lita echoed, her thoughts drifting once again to Adonis, the man she longed for but couldn't have. She shook her head, trying to clear away the images of his strong arms and tender gaze. "Speaking of babies," Iris interjected, a tinge of bitterness in her voice, "it seems that everyone now knows that I carry a boy." She glanced around at the other women nearby, who whispered and cast pitying looks in her direction. "Is that so bad?" Ruth asked gently. "Of course it is," Iris snapped. "I don't need their pity. Perhaps the temple will allow me to keep him." No, they won't, Lita thought. But she didn't have the guts to tell Iris. "My mother won't shut up about babies," Zoe chimed in, her words slurring slightly. I fell pregnant with a boy once, but they made me end it. I'm in no hurry to go back to that temple again. Lita nodded, trying to offer comfort to Iris through a shared glance. Inside, however, she couldn't help but feel that their lives were slipping further and further out of their control. Let's dance, Iris suggested suddenly. We may not have control over everything, but we can at least enjoy tonight. Sure, Lita agreed, taking her friend's hand and allowing herself to be pulled into the throng of dancing women. As the women continued to dance around the bonfire, Lita couldn't help but notice Ruth becoming increasingly close with Zoe. The two of them had drifted together at the edge of the firelight, sharing a kiss that drew the attention of several onlookers. Intimacy between women wasn't forbidden, but it was encouraged to be kept behind closed doors. Ruth always did know how to make an impression, Iris muttered, amusement dancing in her eyes despite her earlier distress. Quite the show, isn't it? Lita replied, a wry smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Get a room, she called out to her sister. Ruth broke the kiss and looked towards Lita and Iris. You two should really give this a try. I mean, you're practically family already, right? What's stopping you? Lita's cheeks flushed crimson at the suggestion, and she struggled to find a response as Iris' expression shifted from shock to intrigue. Ruth, are you serious? Lita managed to stammer, even as her heart raced at the thought of such closeness with her best friend. They had always been close, but the idea of crossing that line was both thrilling and terrifying. Dead serious, Zoe slurred, her confidence bolstered by the wine. You've got nothing to lose, right? Besides, it might even wipe that gloom off your face. Iris bit her lip, her gaze meeting Lita's for a moment before lowering demurely. Well, I can't say the idea isn't tempting, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Lita's thoughts swirled chaotically, torn between the desire for comfort and the lingering ache for Adonis that refused to be silenced. But as she looked into Iris' eyes, filled with a vulnerability that mirrored her own, Lita felt a surge of warmth and affection that she couldn't ignore. Maybe we can, she murmured hesitantly, her words punctuated by the crackling of the bonfire. Are you sure about this? Iris asked softly, her eyes searching Lita's for any sign of hesitation. Lita swallowed hard, trying to push Adonis from her thoughts. I think so, she replied, her voice barely audible above the party around them. Take your time, Lita. We're in this together, Iris reassured her, offering a tender smile that made Lita's heart swell with affection. As they moved closer, their bodies bathed in the warm glow of the bonfire, Lita's doubts began to fade, replaced by the simple comfort of being near someone who understood her. Your skin is so soft, Iris murmured, tracing a delicate pattern across Lita's collarbone. The sensation sent a shiver through her. Yours too, Lita whispered back. But even as she leaned into her friend's warmth, Lita couldn't banish the ghost of Adonis from her thoughts. Each gentle touch brought with it a pang of guilt and longing for the man she had left behind. Is this okay? Iris asked softly, her eyes searching Lita's face, trying to read the emotions that flickered beneath the surface. Why yes, Lita stammered. It's just, what is it? Iris prompted gently, brushing a strand of hair from Lita's forehead. The man at the temple, Lita admitted, feeling a lump forming in her throat. I can't stop thinking about him. Iris' expression softened with understanding. It's okay, Lita. We can find comfort in each other without forgetting about them. Our hearts are big enough for both, don't you think? Yes, Lita bit her lip. I suppose, if she couldn't have Adonis, then perhaps she could at least be held by someone who cared for her. Iris pulled Lita in for another kiss, slow and tender, and Lita let herself be drawn in, seeking solace in the closeness, in the simple comfort of being held by someone who understood. For a little while she let the warmth of her friend push back the ache of everything she couldn't have, and the firelight and the dark and the music blurred softly together around them. Afterward, Lita rested her head against Iris' shoulder, her eyes wet. Do you feel better now? Iris asked, her voice hoarse with emotion. A little, Lita whispered. It gets better, Iris whispered. We may never see them again, but we'll always have each other. Lita nodded as tears threatened to spill down her face. Would it really get easier? Would the baby be enough to help her forget Adonis and the promise that she made him? A shadow fell over them. It was Ruth, her cheeks flushed and her breath unsteady from her own evening. Wow, Ruth said, smirking as she surveyed Lita and Iris. You two looked cozy. Who would have thought? Lita glanced away, suddenly self-conscious, while Iris met Ruth's gaze with a defiant stare. It's not like you haven't done the same with Zoe, or all your other new friends that I've been hearing about, Iris retorted. Ruth laughed, unfazed by Iris' remark. True enough, but I never thought I'd see the day when my prim and proper sister would let loose like this. Things change, Lita replied softly, her voice tinged with melancholy. We all change. Her days of sneaking out at night were slowly coming to an end. Soon she would be an aunt, then a mother. Her days would be full of child-rearing with little time for friends. She needed to move on and forget about Adonis. When Lita awoke a week later, she knew at once that something was wrong. By nightfall, the cramping had grown impossible to ignore, and her worst fears were quietly confirmed. "It's gone," said her grandmother gently, after the healer had come and gone. "I'm sorry, child. The pregnancy could not hold." "Are you sure?" Lita asked, too shocked to form any emotion. "These things happen," her grandmother said with a sigh, "especially with the first pregnancy. But don't worry, my child, you're still young. You'll have plenty more chances to fall pregnant again." Lita nodded, but it felt like her dreams were slipping away along with the child she would never hold. Chapter 6. The temple was hushed under the glow of candlelight. Shadows flickered across the stone walls as Lita walked down the long hallway. Female guards moved silently, like wraiths, their eyes carefully watching Lita's progress through the temple. Their presence seemed so much more sinister after Adonis' confession. "Are you here for Adonis again?" one of the guards asked, startling Lita. "Why yes," Lita stammered, trying to maintain her composure. "My pregnancy didn't take very well," the guard replied, eyeing Lita skeptically before leading her through the winding corridors toward Adonis' chamber. The guard rapped her knuckles against the wooden door, then unlocked it, pushing it open to allow Lita to enter. "Good luck," the guard muttered before shutting the door and locking it behind Lita. Lita's eyes adjusted to the dimly lit chamber as she stepped inside, her heart pounding in anticipation. The air was heavy with the scent of burning candles and incense. Adonis, sitting on a plush cushion beside a low table, looked up from a book in his hands. His startled gaze met Lita's, and he blinked in disbelief. "Lita?" he whispered, setting the book down and rising to his feet. "I didn't expect to see you again." As he approached her, Lita couldn't help but study his handsome features, the way his blonde hair framed his face. Even his surprise seemed elegant. She swallowed hard, gathering her courage. "I'm sorry. I became pregnant, so my grandmother forbid me from coming until—" Adonis' expression softened, a mix of understanding and concern crossing his face. He quietly closed his book. "I see," he murmured, his voice soothing. "It must have been a difficult time for you." Lita nodded, her eyes welling up with tears as she looked into Adonis' deep blue eyes. She felt a rush of emotions, longing, regret, and the familiarity of being in his presence once more. "I still want to keep my promise," she said, her voice quivering. "I want to find a way to get you out of here." "Lita," Adonis sighed, "your kindness is touching, but we both know that such a thing isn't possible. And even if I did get out, they would hunt me down without mercy. Then we'll figure it out together. I refuse to let you suffer any longer. Lita, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. I've been a prisoner here for so long, and nobody has ever managed to free me." "Maybe they didn't try hard enough," Lita countered, her voice firm. "Or maybe they didn't have the right reasons to fight for you. But I do, Adonis. I care about you, and I won't give up until I find a way to set you free." Adonis stared at Lita, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and a glimmer of hope. He stood up and moved towards her, his expression a mix of gratitude and caution. "You really feel that strongly?" he asked softly, his voice tinged with a hint of disbelief. Lita nodded, her determination unwavering. "Yes, Adonis. I can't stand by and watch you suffer any longer. I'll find a way, no matter what it takes." Adonis reached out and gently took Lita's hands in his. His touch was warm and reassuring, sending a shiver of connection down her spine. He studied her eyes, as if searching for any hint of doubt. "You have a heart that's more courageous than I ever imagined," he said, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and concern. "But you need to understand the danger. The people who keep me here, they're not to be underestimated." Lita squeezed his hands. "I'm not underestimating anything, Adonis. I know it won't be easy, but I can't let fear dictate my actions. If there's even the slightest chance of setting you free, I'm willing to take it." Adonis' lips curled into a faint smile, and he drew Lita into a gentle embrace. "Thank you, Lita," he murmured into her hair. "You've given me a reason to hope again." Their mouths met with a mixture of longing and hesitation. Lita's heart raced, and she closed her eyes, surrendering to the sensation of his lips against hers. The kiss deepened, becoming a fusion of shared emotions that had been suppressed for so long. Adonis' hand slid from her chin to cradle the back of her head, drawing her closer. Lita's fingers instinctively gripped the fabric of his robe. It had been too long since their last night together. She had missed him, the warmth of him, the comfort of his arms. Adonis brushed a soft kiss along her jaw. "I'll do whatever I can for you in return," he whispered. Lita trembled, torn between longing and apprehension. She wanted to be close to him as badly as he did, perhaps even more, after being denied him for so long. But the memory of her last pregnancy, and the terrible loss that followed, still haunted her. "Adonis," She pulled back to meet his gaze, her breathing uneven. What if, I'm not ready for that yet? Adonis cupped her face in his hands, his eyes soft with understanding. For a child? Yes, Lita nodded, trying to suppress her own shame. I don't want to become pregnant again. Not yet. Then we need not risk it, he said gently. There are other ways to be close, ways that carry no chance of a child. Other ways? Allow me to show you, Lita, he murmured, threading his fingers through her hair and drawing her mouth back to his. Lita's answering sigh was lost in their kiss as the warmth flared between them once more. She drew him down toward the bed, and the candlelight guttered low around them, the locked door and the temple and the cruel world beyond it all falling softly away. Afterward, Lita settled into Adonis' arms with a sigh of contentment. The problems of the outside world seemed far away. In Adonis' arms there was only warmth, comfort, and peace. You're sure you want to do this? Adonis asked quietly, his lips brushing the top of her head. Helping me could put you in danger. I'm sure. Lita tilted her face up to kiss him softly. You're worth the risk. Then there is someone who I think could help us. Adonis slipped from the bed and walked across the room to his desk. He tore a page from the book, taking a pencil and quickly writing a message in the margins. He folded the paper and brought it to her. There's a blacksmith at the central market, said Adonis. Ask for Orion and give him this. He may know something that could help us. Lita took the note, clutching it tightly in her fist. I will, but who is Orion? My father, he said. Well, the closest thing I ever had to a father. He was released from the temple a few years ago, but he sometimes sends messages when he can. Lita burned with curiosity to know more, but she sensed that talking about it was difficult for him. I understand. I'll deliver the message. Adonis' mouth curved into a smile. You are a gift, Lita. However did I come to deserve you? Heat rose in Lita's cheeks. She shrugged, suddenly shy under the intensity of his gaze. I told you. That's not for you to decide. Adonis drew her into his arms. Then I will simply be grateful for whatever grace led you to me. He kissed her slow and deep. Lita gladly lost herself in his embrace. The world around them, with all its cruelty and hardship, faded away, and for that moment it was only the two of them. The marketplace burst with vibrant hues and fragrances. Wooden stalls overflowed with a kaleidoscope of fruits, vegetables, and fabrics. Vendors showcased their wares, while hearty voices beckoned to potential buyers. There were men there as well, older ones that had been released from the temple after doing their time. They moved aimlessly through the market, carrying heavy boxes and farming tools. With a shake of her head, Lita straightened her shoulders and moved into the crowd. She had a promise to keep. She spotted the blacksmith stall ahead, smoke curling up into the sky. A large bald man stood behind the counter, hammering a strip of red-hot metal. His arms were thick as tree trunks, scarred and weathered from countless burns. Lita swallowed hard, her heart thumping. He had to be Orion. She steeled herself and stepped up to the counter. Are you Orion? Her voice sounded weak to her own ears. She clenched her hands to still their trembling. The man glanced up. His gaze raked over her in a single dismissive sweep before returning to his work. What's it to you? Lita fumbled in her pocket and withdrew the folded scrap of paper. I have a message. From Adonis. At the mention of that name, Orion froze. His head jerked up, eyes blazing with a fury that made Lita take an involuntary step back. She forced herself to stand firm, meeting his gaze without flinching. After a long, tense moment, Orion snatched the note from her hand. His lips moved silently as he read the contents. When he looked up again, his expression had softened. Come with me, he rumbled. He ducked under the counter and emerged, gesturing for her to follow. Lita trailed after Orion as he wound through the market. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she kept her chin high. She would see this through. For Adonis, Orion led Lita to a small storeroom behind one of the stalls. It was dim and cramped, smelling of spices and cured meats. Orion turned to face her, arms folded over his massive chest. Adonis says that he trusts you. What do you want? I want to help him? In what way? I want to free him from the temple. One of Orion's shaggy eyebrows rose. Will you? Now? And how do you plan to do that? Lita's face flushed. I haven't gotten to that yet. We were hoping that you could help. Orion rolled his eyes, a mixture of frustration and amusement in his expression. That boy, he muttered. Adonis always had a way of getting himself into trouble. He believes in you. He thinks you can help us find a way to set him free. The blacksmith's gaze bore into her, his scrutiny almost uncomfortable. And you're willing to risk everything for him? Lita nodded firmly, her determination unwavering. Yes, I am. He deserves a chance at freedom, and I won't rest until he's out of that temple. Getting Adonis out won't be easy. The temple is heavily guarded, and the people who keep him there are powerful and ruthless. I know. But I believe there's a way, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to find it. Orion fell silent and stroked his beard as though lost in contemplation. There is someone who may be able to help. But they live outside the city. If you meet me back here after dark, then I can take you to them. I'll be here, she vowed. Thank you, Orion. He grunted in response, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. We'll see if you're as determined as Adonis claims you to be. That evening, Lita's heart raced as she approached the dimly lit rendezvous point. She could see Orion's broad silhouette against the moonlit sky, his strong hands gripping the reins of a horse-drawn cart. Orion, she whispered, stepping forward to greet him. Lita, he replied, his voice barely audible above the sound of the horse's hooves shifting nervously. You're late. Forgive me, Lita murmured, averting her gaze. I had to help my mother. Her pregnancy makes her tired. Get in the cart, Orion ordered, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. Lita obeyed without question, settling herself onto the hard wooden bench. The cart rumbled to life as Orion urged the horse forward, steering it down a winding path that led away from the city lights and into the darkness of the surrounding forest. The moon's silvery glow filtered through the leaves, casting eerie shadows on the path. Orion remained stoic, but Lita could sense an undercurrent of unease. Who is this person you're taking me to? She asked. Orion's gaze flickered toward her, his expression guarded. Someone who lives outside the city and their rules. How do you know they'll help us? Orion's grip on the reins tightened. I don't. Lita nervously gripped her skirt. I see, she muttered, anxiously watching the dark forest around them. She had never been so far outside the city. A heavy silence fell between them. After hours of travel, a tall man stepped into their path. His dark eyes narrowed in suspicion. Orion, the man said coldly. Why did you bring one of them? None of your business, Zach, Orion answered, his voice hard and unwavering. Actually, it is my business, Zach retorted. I have to protect our people from city women like her. Please, Lita interjected, trying to keep her voice steady despite the rising panic within her. I mean no harm. Like hell you do, Zach shot back. Trust me, Zach, Orion said quietly, his tone almost pleading. We're not here to cause trouble. We just wish to speak with Jacob. Fine, Zach spat out, though he clearly remained unconvinced. But I can't have her knowing the way to our camp. He reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out a large strip of cloth, approaching Lita. Wait, what are you doing? She asked. Blindfolding you, Zach replied matter-of-factly. Can't take any risks. All right, Lita murmured, swallowing her fear as she allowed him to tie the blindfold securely around her eyes. Orion walked beside her as Zach led them deeper into the forest. The sounds of the underbrush crunching beneath their feet and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures filled her ears. She clung to Orion, her fingers digging into the rough fabric of his sleeve. Easy, Lita, Orion whispered soothingly. Orion, I don't like this, she admitted, her voice trembling as they navigated through the dense foliage, her imagination running wild with every unfamiliar touch or sound. Neither do I, Orion confessed, but if we want to meet with Jacob, we have no choice but to follow Zach's lead. Almost there, Zach called back to them, his tone gruff but not unkind. Just a little further. After what felt like an eternity, they finally came to a halt. Lita could hear the sounds of people moving around and whispering amongst each other. You can take it off now, said Zach. Lita pulled off the blindfold and blinked, the faint light of the sunrise flooding her vision. The camp was a mix of makeshift tents and shacks made from scrap metal. The air buzzed with activity as people worked on various tasks. Some were cooking over an open fire while others repaired the damaged parts of their temporary shelters. In the center of the camp stood the dilapidated husk of a spaceship, broken in half and rusted beyond repair. Is that? Lita gasped. The Endeavor, said Zach. A piece of junk that crashed on landing, but it makes decent scraps. Lita nodded. She'd heard stories of the ships that brought the first colonists, but they were all damaged beyond repair. It was her first time seeing one up close. Zach led them towards the heart of the camp. Lita couldn't help but notice the eyes that followed them, a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Her eyes widened as she took in the sheer number of young men, even children. She had never seen so many in one place. Orion, look how many men there are, Lita whispered, not wanting to draw more attention. Indeed, Orion muttered, his jaw clenched, but he didn't say more. Zach led them towards a makeshift hut near the center of the camp. Jacob should be in here. He warily glanced at Lita. Don't let this one out of your sight. Lita huffed and crossed her arms. She didn't understand why Zach was so paranoid. Jacob, Zach called out, knocking on the door of the hut. One of the city men is here to see you. The door to the hut swung open with a clang, unveiling a middle-aged man with long brown hair that was tied back with a pink ribbon. He was dressed in a worn black t-shirt and pants. Greetings, Orion, he said brightly. How nice of you to visit us again. And who is your darling friend? Lita, Orion said gruffly. A friend of Adonis. Yes, That boy that you're always talking about, said Jacob. What brings you to my humble hut so early in the morning? I want to free a man from the temple, said Lita. Orion says that maybe you can help. Jacob let out a long sigh. Don't we all? Why don't you come in and we'll discuss it over tea? The interior was a jumbled collection of badly assembled furniture made from scrap. There were shelves full of trinkets and worn books with faded lettering. Jacob gestured toward a set of mismatched chairs around a rickety table where they all took a seat. The scent of freshly brewed tea wafted in the air, mingling with the faint smell of smoke from a small, crackling fire in the corner. Tea? Jacob asked, pouring the steaming liquid into chipped cups. I suppose, Orion muttered as Jacob passed him a cup. Lita nodded and followed his lead, taking a small sip from her own cup. The taste was weak and bitter, but she politely swallowed it down. Jacob leaned back in his chair and regarded Lita with a thoughtful expression. I take it that you've grown up in the city, Lita? Yes, she nodded. Then how much do you know about the treatment of the men? Adonis told me that they are kept in the temple, said Lita, and forced to make babies until they're released. I'm afraid that it's much more complex than that, said Jacob, quietly sipping his tea. The women in power have devised a cruel system to maintain their dominance. They control the number of men born by ending the pregnancy if the child would be a boy. Even if the woman resists, they have other quiet methods of doing so before it progresses too far. Lita felt a wave of nausea wash over her as the words sank in. She thought of Iris and her losses, not to mention her other friends who had been pressured into giving up their male children. She looked at Orion, whose stoic demeanor showed that he wasn't surprised. But why? Lita asked. By limiting the number of men, Jacob continued. They maintain their stranglehold on society. They still need men to maintain the population, so the ones they allow to be born are raised in the temple as breeding stock. Like Adonis, Lita murmured. Exactly. Jacob nodded solemnly. These men are raised in the temple, never knowing freedom, never experiencing anything outside their assigned roles. Their lives are dictated by the desires of the women who use them, and they remain trapped until they're no longer deemed useful, then altered and put to hard labor for the rest of their days. Or until we free them, Orion interjected. Indeed, Jacob agreed, looking between Lita and Orion. Our mission is not only to free the men in the temple, but also to dismantle the oppressive system and restore balance to our society. Lita nodded, trying to process his words. It felt like everything she had known to be true was crashing down around her. What else was a lie? If you really wish to free Adonis, we must proceed carefully, said Jacob. We have the manpower and contacts in the city, but we lack someone inside the temple. If you could be that person, then perhaps we can find a way to free your friend. All right, Lita nodded firmly, her commitment unwavering. I'll do whatever it takes. Good, Jacob said, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Learn as much as you can about the guards and the inner workings of the temple. Earn their trust, listen to their secrets. They're humans, and humans often make mistakes. With the right information, we can exploit those mistakes and create an opportunity to rescue Adonis and the others. We'll support you in every way we can, Orion added. And we'll be ready to act when the time is right. Jacob nodded. But remember, Lita, this won't be easy. The temple is heavily guarded and the consequences of failure are dire. We need to be patient, strategic, and prepared for any challenges that arise. Lita met their gazes, her resolve unshaken. I understand. I won't let you down. Jacob's expression softened. You have a brave heart, Lita. Unlike your cruel leaders, you're willing to challenge the established norms, to risk everything for the sake of justice. Adonis showed me that there's more to this world than what we've been told, Lita replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. I can't turn a blind eye to the suffering around me. How very admirable, Jacob said. But what I've told you here must be kept secret. You are to share nothing about us with the women of the city. Not your friends, and especially not your elders. If they have a hint of our location, they will burn this camp to the ground. I understand, Lita nodded. Then we have a deal. Jacob held out his hand for Lita to shake. Welcome to the right side, Lita. Chapter 7. Every day new men are born into the temple, Jacob muttered, only to be indoctrinated into a life of slavery and solitude. Lita clenched her fists beneath the table, her heart pounding in her chest as she remembered Adonis, locked away and suffering within the temple's walls. She would do whatever it took to free him, and the others who were held captive there. Orion leaned forward, his eyes narrowed as he traced a rough map of the temple onto Jacob's table using a piece of charcoal. It's been a few years, but I still remember most of the layout, Orion said. This is the main entrance. He pointed to a large circular door. It's guarded by female soldiers who will call for reinforcements, so it's better to find another way in. Lita bit her lip as she tried to memorize as much as she could. The temple was a sprawling maze, designed to confuse and disorient anyone who didn't work there. Once inside, We'll have to navigate a series of corridors and chambers, each one full of women, Orion continued, his voice tinged with bitterness. The younger men are held deep within the complex, where they are raised and trained. Jacob nodded. We don't have their numbers, so it's impossible to win against them in a fight. We need to be strategic. We need to know more about the guards and the layout of the other areas. That's where we need you, Lita. I've never seen, here, and here, said Orion while pointing at the map. If you can find out more about these areas and what's inside, it could help greatly. Lita nodded. The temple artwork is old and falling to pieces. I'll try and convince them to let me inside to fix it. Talk with the guards if you can, said Jacob. Try and earn their trust. The more we know about their routines and habits, the easier it might be to see an opening. What if we put Adonis in a disguise, said Lita, and snuck him out that way? Zack did that, said Orion. He stole some women's clothing and makeup and walked straight out the door. But even if we manage to pull off the same trick again, it will only work once, said Jacob. It won't help us to save the other men. Not to mention that Adonis is fully grown, said Orion. He won't be able to pull off a dress as well as Zack did as a teen. Lita's mouth couldn't help but curve up into a smile at the thought of someone as haughty as Zack cross-dressing his way to freedom. Lita straightened her posture, focusing on the task at hand. So we need a plan that addresses the guards, the layout, and their routine. Orion, do you remember anything about the schedules of the guards or any patterns in their movements when you were there? Orion rubbed his chin thoughtfully. They seem to change shifts around midday and again at midnight. There's usually a period of overlap where some areas are left unguarded. Jacob nodded. Exploiting that overlap could create a window of opportunity, but we need to confirm to make sure. Lita, how soon can you return to the temple? Soon, said Lita. I'll speak with the priestess next time I'm there. Jacob nodded. Be cautious and use your best judgment. We're with you every step of the way. Lita felt her heart swell. She wasn't alone in her promise to free Adonis anymore. There were people on her side and she couldn't be more grateful. She smiled, letting the warmth of their support wrap around her. Thank you, she said with a nod. I'll do my best. Lita and Orion made their way through the camp, walking side by side in contemplative silence. Lita noticed a young couple washing clothes together by the river. The woman scrubbed the garments against a washboard while the man wrung them out and hung them to dry on a nearby line. They worked seamlessly as a team, laughing and chatting, their love for one another evident in every shared glance and gentle touch. Lita couldn't help but feel a pang of longing as she watched them. It was such a simple scene, yet it highlighted the stark contrast between their harmonious relationship and the oppressive system that ruled the city. She imagined a life where she and Adonis could share in such mundane tasks, free from the constraints imposed upon them. A life where they could openly love and support one another without fear of retribution. That's the way that things used to be, said Orion. Men and women living together. With your help, perhaps we can bring it back. Yeah, maybe, Lita mumbled. Do you think that it's really possible to change things? To create a world where men can be free again? Orion paused for a moment, considering his response. I believe we can, he said firmly. But it won't be easy. Jacob's an optimist. But there will be plenty who will resist change, both inside and outside the temple. But if we can show them a better way, I believe we can make a difference. Lita nodded and crossed her arms over her chest. I hope you're right, she said quietly. For the sake of Adonis and all the others, I hope you're right. As they made their way back to the cart, Lita clung to the image of the young couple by the river, drawing strength from their love and unity. It was a reminder of all they were fighting for. A future where men and women could stand side by side as equals, free to live and love as they chose. And she would do everything in her power to help bring that future to life. Lita's heart pounded as she approached the door to her family's home, her mind replaying the events at Jacob's camp. Her nerves tingled with anxiety. She took a deep breath before opening the door. The scent of burning incense immediately enveloped her, a familiar fragrance that usually brought comfort. Today, however, it only heightened her unease. Lita was greeted by the sight of her sister Ruth tangled up with Zoe on the sofa, the two of them sharing a lazy kiss. Lita stammered, the words catching in her throat. Ruth and Zoe broke apart, turning to face Lita with flushed cheeks. Hey, sis, Ruth said, a little breathless. You're finally back. Can't you two get a room? Lita blurted out, unable to contain her discomfort. Ruth had brought Zoe and other women back to the house several times after becoming pregnant. Ruth and Zoe exchanged amused glances before breaking into soft laughter. Someone's a little tense, Zoe teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Easy there, Ruth interjected, playfully twirling a lock of Zoe's hair around one finger. She's just shy. The door to the living room burst open with a force that made them jump. Lita's grandmother stood in the doorway with an expression of thunderous disapproval. Her piercing gaze locked onto Lita, making the young woman feel like a small child caught in the act of mischief. And where have you been? Eudora demanded, her voice low but firm, her hands firmly planted on her hips. Lita swallowed hard, acutely aware of her racing heart and the heat rising to her cheeks. I was just out, she stammered, trying to sound nonchalant but failing miserably. Eudora's gaze bored into her, as if she could see through the flimsy excuse straight to the truth. Lita could feel the weight of her grandmother's disappointment and anger, and it took all her willpower not to break under the pressure. Out all night? Without even a word to your family? Eudora continued, her tone dripping with disdain. Where were you? Think, Lita told herself, struggling to come up with an answer. Oh come on, grandmother, Ruth said with a mischievous grin. Lita was just at Iris' house. You know how those two are inseparable. Instantly, the room seemed to lighten. Lita felt a wave of gratitude towards her sister. Eudora's gaze didn't waver, but Ruth's explanation seemed to buy Lita a momentary reprieve. Iris' house? Eudora repeated, her skepticism evident. All night? Lita seized the opportunity, desperately grasping at any thin thread of truth. She's still upset about the baby, she blurted out, hoping the lie would hold. I was comforting her. Yeah, comforting her, Ruth added with a wink. Eudora rolled her eyes. Well, make sure to tell us next time. We deserve to know where you are. I will, Lita promised, feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. With a final, scrutinizing look, Eudora turned and left the room, the weight of her disappointment still hanging in the air. Ruth let out a long breath once their grandmother was gone. Smooth save, huh? She said with a wry smile. Lita gave her sister a weak smile in return. Thanks for covering for me. I owe you one. Ruth's smile faded. Lita, I know you've been avoiding Iris because of what happened at the party, but you need to talk to her. She's your best friend. Lita sighed, knowing Ruth was right. Her heart still raced at the memory of that night at the party, but she couldn't help being drawn to Adonis even more. The conflicting feelings made it difficult for her to face Iris, but Lita knew that if she didn't address the situation soon, she might lose her best friend forever. All right, I'll talk to her, Lita said. After I speak with Adonis, she thought. The dim glow of the moonlight filtering through the window cast a silvery sheen on Lita and Adonis as they lay close together in the quiet of his chamber, her head resting on his chest. Adonis' fingers traced idle patterns along her arm. Their breaths mingled, soft and unhurried, as Lita found the courage to whisper her secret plan. Adonis, I went to Orion, she said, her voice quivering. We went to a settlement of free men outside the city. We're working on a plan to free you. Adonis' fingers stilled upon hearing Lita's words, his blue eyes widening with hope. He gazed deeply into her eyes, searching for any trace of deceit but finding only sincerity and love. Really? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Lita reached out to gently caress his cheek. You're not alone anymore, she assured him. We'll find a way to get you out. Adonis nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. Thank you, Lita, he murmured. I've never known a woman like you before. He leaned in to press a tender kiss on her forehead, then trailed a soft kiss along her cheek. The sensation of his touch only served to strengthen their resolve, each gentle gesture a testament to the life they would build together once they were free. You're inspiring, Lita. His hand moved gently along her waist as he drew her closer. I cannot wait to experience the world outside this temple with you. Lita tilted her face up to his, and the moonlight and the quiet wrapped around them as the world beyond the chamber fell softly away. Afterward, Lita settled into the crook of his arm. She closed her eyes and pressed her face to his chest, listening to the sound of his heart beating beneath her ear. This was bliss. She wanted this every day with him. Soon, she thought as her lips curved into a smile, soon you'll be free. Chapter 8. Lita's fingertips gently traced the delicate lines etched into the temple's artwork. Her heart swelled with pride as she admired the intricate designs and vibrant colors, feeling an unmistakable connection to the culture and history of Venus 6 through the art. Yet, an unsettling feeling lingered, as though something ominous lurked beneath the surface. Hey, she called out hesitantly, attempting to engage one of the guards stationed in the shadowy corner of the hall. I've always been intrigued by this piece. Do you happen to know anything about the artist? The guard responded with a dismissive eye roll, turning away from Lita without uttering a word. Lita's heart sank as she realized the futility of her attempt. Most of the guards were older women in their 30s and 40s, seemingly uninterested in conversing with younger women, let alone newcomers. A sense of frustration welled up within her. How could she gather more information about the temple if the guards remained so uncooperative? Lita's shoulders slumped as she let out a sigh. She was a terrible spy. She'd tried her best to infiltrate the unmapped areas of the temple, but every attempt so far had failed. They were either locked or swarming with women, so there was no way to get in or out undetected. It had been weeks since she made her promise to Orion and Jacob, but she hadn't discovered anything that they could use to free Adonis. Lita's fingers glided over the artwork, studying the patterns and images to distract herself from her failures. She ventured further into the dimly lit chamber. The lanterns flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls adorned with vibrant murals. Her attention was drawn to a worn painting. Her fingers brushed against a large bump that seemed oddly out of place. It gave way with a soft click, revealing a hidden passageway. The narrow corridor was dimly lit, with only faint light seeping in through small holes in the walls. Moss clung to the stone, and spiderwebs dangled from the ceiling. Small nooks in the walls contained unlit torches and remnants of long-extinguished candles. Laughter echoed from behind Lita as several young women passed through the main hall for their appointments. Without thinking, Lita darted into the passage and closed the door behind her, her heart racing in her chest. She pressed her back against the cool stone wall and tried to calm her racing thoughts. What was this place? Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but she needed to find out more. She needed to find something that she could tell Jacob and Orion. She cautiously moved forward, treading softly on the uneven stone floor. As she ventured deeper into the narrow passageway, the laughter grew fainter, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. She realized, with a slow chill, that the small holes in the wall looked through into the chambers beyond, into rooms much like Adonis. The passage had been built so that someone could watch. She pressed her eye to one of the holes, and her cheeks burned. A man and a woman were there, and she understood at once what the room was for, and what the temple expected to happen in it. She pulled her gaze away, her face hot with shame at having looked at all. She moved further down the passageway, glimpsing several empty rooms, and one with a young man curled up alone on his bed, staring at nothing. Muffled voices and quiet sounds drifted through the passage the further she progressed. Through another hole she glimpsed a female guard, her uniform discarded, with one of the men, and looked away quickly, her stomach turning. So it was not only the women who came for appointments who used this place. The guards took what they wanted from the men too. Lita clenched her fists, struggling to quiet the storm of emotions raging within her. Adonis, she whispered under her breath. His room had to be somewhere further along. As she crept onward, the glimpses grew worse, and her understanding with them. In one room a man flinched away from a guard who loomed over him. In another, a man sat chained at the wrist, his head bowed in defeat. And in another, a man wept openly while a priestess spoke to him with cold impatience, as though his misery were an inconvenience. "Come on, Nikos," the priestess was saying. "You'll have to get used to this eventually. Don't you want to make lots of babies like your friends?" Lita pressed a hand to her mouth, sickened. How had things gotten this way? This was no sanctuary. It was a prison, and worse. "Adonis," echoed a voice from the next room. "Adonis." Lita's heart raced as she approached the next narrow gap in the wall. Her fingers brushed against the rough surface of the ancient stone, and she hesitated for a moment, wondering whether she really wanted to see what was on the other side. Taking a deep breath, Lita steeled herself and leaned in to peer through the hole. Her breath caught. Adonis was there, with a young woman, her fiery red hair spilling across the white sheets. He was doing what the temple kept him for, what they forced him to do day after day, with whoever paid for him. His face was a careful mask of gentleness, but Lita, who knew him, could see the hollowness behind it, the quiet anguish of a man with no choice in any of it. "Gods, you're wonderful," the woman sighed. "I can't wait to have more of your babies." Lita tore her gaze away, her chest aching. She pressed her back to the cold stone, blinking hard against the sting of tears. Her mind churned with conflicting emotions. It hurt to see him like that, used by another, but the hurt was nothing beside the fury rising in her on his behalf. This was his every day. This was the life they had sentenced him to. A stronger sense of duty pulled her back, reminding her of the promise she had made, the vow to help him escape the cruel clutches of this place. "Focus, Lita," she whispered to herself, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the edge of the hole. "You have a job to do." Withdrawing from the hole, she melted back into the passageway's shadows. Her heart was heavy with inner turmoil, but she drew strength from the plan she had crafted alongside Orion, Jacob, and Zach. Together, they would orchestrate Adonis' escape from his gilded prison. And maybe then, Lita could confront her own desires. "Stay strong, Adonis," she murmured as she pressed forward down the dim corridor, determination propelling her every step. Lita ignored the rest of the rooms, trying her best to block out the muffled sounds from behind the walls. Every step she took seemed to add more weight on her shoulders, until she finally reached the end of the passage. Lita's fingers trembled as she pushed the door open, a sliver of ethereal light spilling into the dim corridor. She stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat at the sight that greeted her. It was a large storage room filled with gleaming metal vehicles that she had only seen in paintings. Trucks, their massive frames adorned with polished chrome and intricate designs, stood in neat rows, their wheels as tall as she was. Their imposing size and intricate detailing filled her with wonder. Lita couldn't resist walking closer to one of them, her footsteps echoing softly in the spacious chamber. Her fingertips trailed along the smooth surface of the truck's hood, feeling the cold, unyielding metal beneath her touch. It was a surreal moment, standing in the presence of these ancient colossal machines. Lita's mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps these could help them to free Adonis. "Look, this is the entrance," Lita explained, pointing to a hidden door sketched in one of her drawings. "It's behind a large mural in the temple, and there's a whole network of passages down there." The flickering light from a nearby oil lamp played on her face, reflecting her excitement as she looked up at Jacob and Orion. They huddled together, studying her sketches. Jacob raised an eyebrow, tapping his beard in deep thought. "So there are multiple entrances?" "Yes," Lita replied, "and they lead to different parts of the temple. Maybe we can use them to move Adonis and the others without the guards spotting us." Orion grunted in agreement. "Doesn't surprise me that some twisted soul built spy holes into the walls." Jacob scratched his chin, examining the sketches of the trucks. "Lita, can you join me for a moment?" Lita nodded and followed Jacob outside into the bustling camp. The rising sun cast a warm, golden glow over the scene as men and women hurriedly prepared for the day ahead. The air buzzed with activity, tents coming down, breakfast fires crackling, and conversations murmuring in the background. Jacob led her around the crashed spaceship. Rusted parts sprawled across the field, but it was what lay beyond the spaceship that caught Lita's attention. Nestled in the earth, partially obscured by the encroaching soil and decades of neglect, was an old rusted truck. Its once vibrant colors had faded to a dull gray and the shattered windshield exposed the interior to the elements, long eroded and covered in moss. "Is this like the trucks you saw?" Jacob asked, pointing at the half-buried vehicle. Lita studied the truck, her heart pounding in her chest. The rusty metal, the faded paint, it was all so familiar. She recalled the intricate details she had captured in her sketches and felt a surge of hope coursing through her veins. "Yes," she breathed, barely able to contain her excitement. "It's the same." Jacob nodded thoughtfully, running a hand through his hair. "This could help us evacuate the men from the city more efficiently." "Do you know how they work?" "No, but Zach might. He spent the most time studying the ship's computer." Lita blanched. Zach seemed popular amongst the camp, but he was still cold towards her. She wasn't sure she wanted to deal with him. "Take these to him." Jacob passed Lita her sketches. "See if he thinks they could still work." Lita nodded and placed the papers back in her bag. Taking a deep breath, she steeled her nerves and headed towards Zach's tent. Lita carefully opened the flap of Zach's tent, her pulse quickening as she peered into the dimly lit space. The air was thick with the scent of burnt wires, and the floor was strewn with electronic parts and old human technology. She stepped in cautiously, trying not to disturb the delicate balance of his workspace. Zach looked up from a piece of circuitry, his dark eyes narrowing at the sight of Lita. "What are you doing here?" he said coldly, his tone dripping with disdain. "Zach, I need your help," Lita replied hesitantly, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. As much as she disliked seeking assistance from this abrasive man, she knew that she had to try. "Really?" Zach scoffed, setting down the circuit board and fixing Lita with a frosty glare. "And what could someone like me possibly do for the likes of you?" Despite the hostility oozing from him, Lita stood her ground, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. "I found these old trucks inside the temple," she declared firmly, her voice unwavering. "Jacob said you might know how to operate them." She reached into her bag and pulled out the sketches, passing them to Zach. His dark eyes roamed over the faint lines. "And what am I supposed to do with these? Can you help me figure out how to use them? They could be our way to free Adonis." "Adonis, huh?" Zach sneered, tossing the sketches back onto the table. "You think you can just stroll into the temple and rescue him like some fairy tale princess?" "Zach, please," Lita implored, her eyes pleading. "I know it sounds crazy, but there's something about him that I can't ignore. I need to help him. Listen, Lita." Zach's voice dripped with condescension. "I get it. You believe you're in love with this guy. But let me lay it out for you." He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know the first thing about Adonis." Lita's heart raced, anger simmering just below the surface. However, she restrained herself as Zach continued. "Adonis isn't some imprisoned prince awaiting a rescue. He spent his whole life in that god-forsaken temple, used by them since he was barely more than a boy." A bitter laugh escaped Zach's lips. "Freeing him won't guarantee you're happily ever after. That guy is probably too broken to even recognize real love." Lita clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to argue, to scream, but instead, she drew a deep breath to steady her nerves. Her jaw tightened as she fought to maintain her composure. "That may be true, but you don't know me," Lita retorted, her determination shining through her voice. "You can't possibly comprehend what I feel for Adonis. The atmosphere inside the tent bristled with tension as Lita stood her ground, refusing to let Zach's words weaken her resolve. She breathed deeply, her chest rising and falling with each breath. "Sometimes, love isn't about knowing every detail of a person's life," she continued. "It's about being willing to stand by them, even when you can't possibly understand their pain." She couldn't help but remember the first time she had laid eyes on Adonis. The way his blonde hair framed his face, accentuating his high cheekbones and full lips, the intensity of his piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul, the gentle warmth of his touch as they shared their first quiet moment together. "Adonis deserves a shot at happiness, just like anyone else," she murmured softly, her gaze unwavering. "And I'll fight for him, no matter the odds." Though Zach's expression softened marginally, skepticism still clouded his eyes. "Fine," he muttered, looking away, "but don't say I didn't warn you." "Thank you for your help, Zach," Lita said quietly, turning toward the tent's entrance. She struggled to compose herself, her resolve to save Adonis burning brighter than before. She was determined to prove Zach wrong and demonstrate that her love for Adonis was not a fleeting passion, but a bond capable of overcoming any challenge. Chapter 9. Lita trembled in the gloom of the narrow passage, her pulse racing as she peered through a hole in the wall. Despite knowing that it was wrong, the temptation to catch a glimpse of Adonis overpowered her rational thoughts. There he was, the man who haunted her dreams, with a young blonde woman, doing what the temple forced him to do day after day. Lita made herself look away, but not before she caught the careful, practiced gentleness on his face, the same gentleness he showed her. The thought that it might mean nothing, that she might be just another appointment to him, settled like a stone in her chest. "Gods, you're wonderful," she heard the woman sigh through the wall, her voice soft and sated. "You've shown me the heavens." "Your pleasure is my purpose," Adonis replied, his tone gentle and polite, as always. Lita took a step back. She couldn't help but question her own role in Adonis' life. She had promised to free him from his captivity within the temple, believing that once she did, they could be together. But hearing him with another woman, she couldn't help but feel a pang of insecurity. Was she foolish to think that he would want her when he was surrounded by so many beautiful and willing women? Lita took a deep breath, trying to summon her strength, but it was then that she felt a firm grip on her arm, pulling her away from the hole. "What are you doing?" Zach hissed, dragging her down the dark passage. Lita's face flushed with embarrassment, her heart pounding in her chest. I, Lita stuttered, but she couldn't think of any way to defend herself. The storage room was dimly lit, casting eerie shadows on the walls as Lita observed Zach at work beneath the truck's hood. He was wearing a thin tank top and shorts, his forearms smeared with grease and dirt. There was something undeniably capable about him as he worked. "What are you doing here?" Lita asked him. "Give me a minute," Zach replied gruffly, continuing to work on the engine before him. She shifted from one foot to the other, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence further. After what felt like an eternity, he finally set down his wrench and wiped his hands on a dirty rag. "All right, what do you want?" he asked, his dark eyes fixed on hers. His gaze lacked warmth, filled with suspicion and frustration. It was clear he still didn't trust her. "Why are you in the temple?" Lita asked. "I thought you hated this place." "Fixing these," Zach said. "Someone needed to come check if they worked." "But how did you even get in here?" "I came in with the grocer." "The grocer?" "Yeah, he sneaked me in his cart. Some of the old men make deliveries to the temple. The guards only bothered checking the carts leaving, not the ones coming in." Lita raised an eyebrow. "So now you're living here? Where do you even sleep? How do you eat?" Zach impatiently crossed his arms, grumbling as he avoided her gaze. "I get by," he muttered. "I scrounge up food wherever I can and sleep wherever I find a spot. It's not ideal, but someone had to come in and make preparations." His demeanor softened slightly, though he remained guarded. "I'm doing what I can to help those who are stuck here," he explained, his voice low and steady. "They used to be my friends too, you know, like Adonis?" Lita asked tentatively, her heart skipping a beat when his name came up. "Yeah, like Adonis," Zach confirmed, his eyes narrowing as if he were trying to decipher her thoughts. "But don't think for a second that I'm only doing this for you or your obsession." Lita's cheeks flushed at his accusation, but she refused to be intimidated by him. "You come off all prim and proper, but you're a bit of a creeper, aren't you?" Zach remarked with a smirk. "Spying on Adonis with another woman like that." Lita's cheeks reddened, but she stood her ground. "I didn't mean to watch," she said defensively, "but I just haven't been able to see him lately. My family's been busy with the newborn babies, so my grandmother refused to book any more appointments with Adonis." Zach's expression softened slightly at her explanation, although the guarded look in his eyes remained. "You know, I've seen this before. Women becoming infatuated with the temple men over a few visits. Are you sure that you don't just feel overly attached because of what happens in that bed?" Lita's eyes welled up as her insecurities and fears surfaced. "It's not just about that," she insisted, clenching her fists. "I feel a deep connection with Adonis, one that goes beyond the physical. He's kind, gentle, and charismatic, despite all the hardships he's been through. But you've never even spent time with him outside the temple," Zack snapped back. "Maybe you only like him because of what he does for you in there. Then let's test your theory." Lita took a step closer, her chin lifting in challenge. "Maybe I should just see how I feel with someone else." Zack tensed, his dark eyes narrowing. "You're just like the rest of them." His voice was low and bitter, treating men as an easy toy to scratch an itch. Lita faltered, her heart twisting painfully in her chest. His words stung more than she cared to admit. Her infatuation with Adonis had clouded her judgment, and it was becoming harder to deny. Lita's gaze fell to the floor. "I'm sorry, Zack," she muttered. "I don't know what came over me." A somber silence hung in the air between them. She could see the conflict swirling within Zack's eyes, and she held her breath, unsure of his next move. It was then, in that moment of vulnerability, that something shifted within him. "Screw it," he muttered, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. His strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close as his lips found hers. Lita let herself fall into it, telling herself this would finally answer the question of whether what she felt for Adonis was anything more than the body's wanting. The storage room and the rows of trucks and the cold metal at her back all blurred away. But even then, she couldn't stop thinking of Adonis, the way he looked at her with those intense eyes, the gentleness in his touch. The whole time, her mind stayed somewhere else, with him, only ever him. By the end she had her answer, and it was the opposite of what Zack believed. It had never been about the body at all. She was left torn between the release and the quiet ache that it hadn't been Adonis who brought her there. Zack must have read it on her face. "Just like I figured," he muttered, looking away. "Your heart's somewhere else entirely." Lita's hand trembled as she pushed open her front door. Her eyes widened at the mess inside. The living room, once neat and tidy, now looked like a tornado had passed through it. Over the chaos, a baby's cries pierced the air, sending a jolt through her. "Mother?" Lita called out with uncertainty as she surveyed the mess. Cassia stepped out from the shadows, looking utterly drained. Her usually perfectly styled hair hung limp around her tired face. It was as if she had aged overnight, weighed down by everything going on. "Here," Cassia said abruptly, thrusting the crying baby into Lita's arms. "Hold her." "Wah," Lita stammered, struggling to balance the squirming infant. The baby's cries only grew louder, her tiny face turning red. "Please, just take her," Cassia repeated, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. I can't handle this anymore." "Okay, Mom," Lita whispered softly, her voice steadier than she felt. Cassia's face remained expressionless as she turned away from Lita and disappeared down the hallway, leaving her daughter to grapple with the baby. She navigated through the cluttered room, her mind racing with concern for her mother. Cassia had been different since the baby was born. She was constantly tired and struggled to meet all of the baby's needs, often crying to herself late at night. The door to the room swung open with a loud bang. Lita's grandmother walked in, holding Andrea, Ruth's daughter. "Ruth," Eudora snapped, her voice sharp and cutting. "How many times do I have to tell you to take better care of Andrea? Your reckless behavior has already brought shame to this family, and now you're neglecting your own child." Lita winced at her grandmother's harsh words, her heart racing as she shielded the baby from Eudora's anger. She glanced at Ruth, who stood defiantly in the doorway, chin up and eyes filled with rebellion. "Look at your sister," Eudora continued, pointing toward Lita. "At least she's stepping up to help with the babies while you're out there tarnishing our family's name." "Grandmother, please," Lita pleaded, her voice barely audible in the tense room. "This isn't helping anyone." "Be quiet, girl," Eudora snapped, her gaze fixed firmly on Ruth. Ruth, seemingly unfazed by Eudora's scolding, responded with a carefree laugh. "Isn't this what you wanted, grandmother? For me to be a grown-up woman with babies of my own? Well, I gave you your precious grandchild. You should be more grateful." Lita winced at Ruth's words, knowing they would only make their grandmother angrier. She could practically feel the heat coming off Eudora, but there was a spark of admiration in Lita for Ruth's audacity. "You're such an insolent girl," Eudora hissed, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "You might think you're clever, but your defiance will only lead to misery in the long run. Remember my words, Ruth." Rather than shrinking under her grandmother's warning, Ruth tossed her head back and laughed again, clear and triumphant. "Maybe, grandmother," Ruth retorted with a wicked grin, "but at least I'll have lived life on my terms. Can any of you say the same?" As Ruth's laughter filled the room, Lita's mind swirled with mixed emotions. She felt resentment towards Ruth for her selfish behavior, sympathy for her mother's silent suffering, and frustration with Eudora's strict expectations. Even though Lita was surrounded by family, she couldn't tell a single one of them about her plan. "Enough," Eudora snapped, her voice cutting through the room sharply. She shot one last glare at Ruth before turning her attention to Lita. "Take Marissa and put her down for a nap. We'll discuss this further once she's quiet." Lita nodded firmly and took the baby to the nursery. The nursery was softly lit and carried the gentle scent of lavender. Lita stood by the crib, her fingers touching the warm soft blankets that wrapped the baby. "Rest peacefully, Marissa," she whispered, gently rocking the crib. Marissa shared Adonis' striking features, gleaming golden hair that stood out even in the dim light, and mesmerizing blue eyes that appeared to hold a universe within them. Was this what Lita's child would have looked like if they survived? A soft knock on the nursery door pulled Lita back to reality. "Come in," Lita called softly, wiping her eyes. The door opened slowly, and Lita's heart raced when she saw Iris, heavily pregnant, standing before her. Her best friend's long black hair framed her radiant face, but the concern in her eyes was hard to miss. They hadn't spoken in months, their friendship strained by what had happened between them at that party. "Hey," Iris said quietly, a slight tremble in her voice. "I hope I'm not bothering you." A wave of guilt and regret washed over Lita as she realized she hadn't been there for Iris during her pregnancy. Her feelings for Adonis had driven a wedge between them, leaving her best friend to navigate this challenging time on her own. Lita couldn't help but feel ashamed. "Of course not," Lita reassured her, stepping away from the crib to envelop Iris in a warm embrace. "Iris, I'm so sorry for not speaking to you until now," Lita began, her voice trembling slightly. "After what happened between us, I didn't know how to face you. I didn't want to ruin our friendship." Iris reached out, holding Lita's hand, and a sense of relief washed over Lita. The warmth of Iris' touch comforted her, and she realized that despite everything, they could still find solace in each other. "Maybe I pushed my feelings too hard on you," Iris said, her voice gentle and sincere. "But it's okay, Lita. We're still friends, and we'll always be there for each other, no matter what." Lita nodded, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude well up inside her. She squeezed Iris' hand tighter, her eyes brimming with tears at the understanding in Iris' gaze. "Thank you, Iris," Lita whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." Lita's heart ached for the child Iris carried, knowing that he would soon be taken from her loving embrace and given to the temple, but she could change that. She could help free the men and change the system. As much as she wanted to tell Iris the plan, Jacob's words reverberated in her mind, reminding her that a single slip of the tongue to the wrong person could ruin everything. "Promise me something, Iris," Lita said, her voice firm but gentle. "No matter what happens, we won't let anything come between us again." Iris smiled through her tears, her grip on Lita's hand unrelenting. "I promise, Lita. We'll always have each other. Don't worry," Lita silently said with a squeeze of Iris' hand. "I'll make sure that you and your baby can be together." Chapter 10. Jacob's eyes locked onto Lita's, his voice low and intense as he began to explain the plan. "Our success hinges on precision timing and flawless coordination," he said while unfolding a detailed map of the temple. Lita leaned in, her long hair brushing against the paper as she studied the intricately drawn layout. All the areas that she had discovered had been added with pencil. "The men are being held captive here." Jacob pointed to a section marked Chambers, positioned near the rear of the temple. His finger traced a path along a network of tunnels that led to various chambers where the men were imprisoned. Lita's mind wandered to Adonis, her pulse quickening at the thought of him still trapped and vulnerable. "Here's the main entrance." Jacob indicated to a grand archway at the front of the temple. "It's heavily guarded, which is why we'll need to create a diversion." Lita nodded, her eyes scanning the map as she committed every detail to memory. She knew there was no room for error, that their lives and the fate of the captive men depended on their ability to execute this plan perfectly. "Orion and some of the older men will start a riot at the east gate. That should be enough to draw most of the guards away. Once we've created the distraction, you'll help Zach and the others to free men and lead them to the trucks. My group will provide cover as soon as they leave the city." "Okay, but what if something goes wrong? What if we're discovered?" Lita couldn't help but let her fears bubble to the surface. "Listen, Lita, I believe in you." Jacob placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've planned for every possible outcome. We'll adapt and overcome any obstacles." "Okay, Jacob," she whispered, her eyes locked with his as she found solace in his unwavering confidence. "I won't let you down." "Good." His grip tightened briefly before releasing her. "Now, let's make history." Lita pressed her trembling body against the cool stone wall of the storage room, her eyes darting from one corner to another. Zach and several other young men and women shared her anxiety, their faces etched with a mix of hope and fear as they waited for the right moment to strike. Lita's gaze wandered to Zach, her thoughts drifting back to what had passed between them. She recalled the unexpected closeness of that moment, and how strange and uncertain it had felt in the hours afterward. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, the pull she had felt toward him contrasting sharply with the guilt now gnawing at her conscience. She wondered if it had been a mistake to be with him, knowing full well her true feelings were for Adonis. "Are you all right, Lita?" Zack asked, noticing her troubled expression. She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about everything." Zack nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "Do you think," Lita whispered, "that we're ready?" "Almost." Zack's gaze never wavered from the door, his hand resting on the hilt of the wooden bat tied to his waist. "Just waiting for Orion's signal." Lita clenched her fists, digging her nails into her palms, focusing on the pain to keep her nerves at bay. "Everyone knows their part, right?" Zack asked, seeking reassurance. "Of course," one of the men replied, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "We won't let you down." "Good," Zack said, nodding his head. Lita's mind raced with thoughts of what could go wrong, but she pushed them aside, refusing to entertain defeat. She needed to be strong, for Adonis and for the others who had put their faith in her. "Once we're inside, remember to move quickly," Zack warned, his tone serious. "The guards won't hesitate to stop any of us." "We've come this far," another man chimed in, determination flickering in his eyes. "We won't back down now." The distant clamor of commotion outside the temple reverberated through the walls, growing louder and more frantic with each passing moment. Lita focused on the sounds, her ears straining to pick up any indication of what was happening. Shouts filled the air, intermingled with the heavy thuds of running footsteps and the clamor of the riot beyond. And then it happened. A deafening explosion rocked the temple, the force so powerful that the walls trembled around them. Zack instinctively grabbed Lita's arm, pulling her towards the secret passageway. "That's the signal." Lita's heart pounded in her chest as she and Zack raced through the dimly lit corridors of the temple. The cool, damp air whispered against her flushed skin, but all she could feel was the burning desire to free Adonis and the other men trapped within these walls. "Ready?" Zack asked, his voice laced with urgency. Lita nodded, her grip tightening around the makeshift crowbar she held. With a shared glance, they threw themselves into their task, prying open door after door, revealing frightened faces and desperate eyes behind each one. "Follow us," Lita urged the men, trying to keep the tremble from her voice. "We're here to help you escape." The initial confusion on the men's faces quickly gave way to hope, and then determination. They stumbled out of their rooms, some clutching bed sheets around themselves, others too dazed to do more than follow. Their bare feet slapped against the cold stone floor as they trailed behind Lita and Zack. "Keep moving," Zack shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "Don't stop until we're all out of here." As they moved from room to room, the chaos only intensified. The sound of shuffling feet grew louder, accompanied by the ragged breathing of the men who had been confined for far too long. "Zack, we're almost at Adonis' room," she said, her voice barely audible over the explosions in the distance. "I know," he replied. "Just a few more doors." Their progress came to a screeching halt as they encountered two guards blocking their path. Lita's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment they had been preparing for, and failure was not an option. "Zack, watch out," she shouted, as one of the guards lunged at him with a wooden baton. Zack barely managed to dodge the attack, his eyes betraying a flicker of fear before he resumed his focused glare. He delivered a swift kick to the other guard's midsection, causing her to stumble backward. "Keep the men safe," Zack instructed Lita, who nodded and quickly began ushering the freed prisoners behind her. The first guard recovered from her stumble, snarling as she charged at Zack again. He dodged the attack with precision, causing the guard to collide with her partner. The two women crashed to the ground, momentarily disoriented. Several of the freed men behind Lita rushed forward, pinning the two guards down before they could rise, years of pent-up rage etched into their features. "Come on, let's go," Zack urged, motioning for Lita to join him as they sprinted toward Adonis' door. Their hearts raced with adrenaline, fueled by the urgency of their mission. "It's this one," Lita huffed, her breath ragged. She placed a hand on the cool wooden surface, a sudden wave of emotion washing over her. It was finally time to free the man she couldn't stop thinking about, the man she believed she could truly love. Zack grabbed the crowbar, positioning it in the lock of the door, but it refused to break. "Stand back," Zack warned, delivering a powerful kick to the door. The hinges groaned under the force, but the door remained intact. "Again!" Lita cried, desperation creeping into her voice. They didn't have much time before more guards would arrive. Together, with a mutual nod, Lita and Zack reared back, using the full force of their combined strength to send the door flying open. The splintered remains of the door fell to the ground with a crash, echoing through the dimly lit chamber. Lita's heart pounded in her chest as she and Zack stepped over the debris, their eyes immediately drawn to the figure at the center of the room, Adonis. Lita's breath hitched in her throat as his eyes locked with hers. Time seemed to stop as they stared at each other across the room. "Wha? How did you?" Adonis stammered, his handsome face painted with shock and disbelief. "Adonis, we're here to get you out of this place," Lita said, her voice trembling with determination. "We freed the other men too, but we need to move quickly before more guards arrive." "Are you serious?" Adonis asked, hope flickering in his eyes as he glanced between Lita and Zack. "You're really going to save us all?" "Every last one of you," Zack confirmed. "But we don't have much time. Come on." They retraced their steps through the chaotic hallways, Adonis marveling at the liberated men, their faces alight with newfound freedom. He stole glances at Lita, captivated by her fierce dedication and strength. "Thank you," he whispered as they rounded a corner, his gratitude unmistakable. "I didn't think I'd ever be free from this place." "Neither did I," Lita admitted, her cheeks flushing with color. "But we can't let our guard down yet. We have to get everyone out and to the trucks safely." "Right," Adonis agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Keep moving," Zack shouted, urging the men forward as they neared the secret passageway. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the corridors, signaling that more guards were indeed on their way. "Almost there," Zack whispered, his eyes darting around the shadows as if anticipating an ambush. His instincts proved correct when, without warning, a guard lunged at Lita from the darkness. "Go!" Lita cried as she hit the ground, the breath knocked out of her lungs. She struggled against her attacker with all the strength she could muster, adrenaline coursing through her veins like liquid fire. "Get off her!" Adonis shouted, but Lita shook her head vehemently. "No. Keep going!" she cried. "Get everyone out safely. I'll catch up." Zack hesitated for a moment, torn between his loyalty to Lita and his responsibility to the others. But as more armed guards emerged from the shadows, he made the hard choice. "Come on!" he barked, dragging a reluctant Adonis away as Lita struggled beneath the guard pinning her down. Lita gritted her teeth in frustration as the guards overpowered her. "Bind her!" one of the guards commanded, and Lita felt rough rope dig into her wrists as they tied her up. Lita remained defiant, refusing to let her fear show. She had to buy time for the others, for Adonis, for Zack, and for all the men they had freed. With a sudden burst of strength, Lita twisted free long enough to send one guard staggering back, but it was futile. The others closed in, and a sharp blow sent her sprawling to the ground, the edges of her vision going dark. She closed her eyes and braced herself, praying that Adonis and the others would make it out alive. The metallic door of the underground cell slammed shut with a resounding clang, the sound echoing through the damp, dimly lit chamber. Lita was thrown onto the cold, hard floor, her shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. She winced, biting back a cry as fear coursed through her veins. Lita curled up into a tight ball, desperately trying to shield herself from the chilling atmosphere that seemed to seep into her very core. Her whole body ached, but it was the sharp ache radiating from her ribs that consumed her thoughts. "Curse it all," she muttered under her breath, an involuntary shiver rippling down her spine as she clutched her side. There was no way of knowing what happened to the others. She could only pray that they managed to escape. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridor, drawing nearer and nearer to Lita's cell. She tensed. The cold metal door swung open with a screech, revealing the towering figure of a large guard. "Look at you, all curled up like a pathetic little worm," the guard sneered. Lita met her gaze without flinching, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reply. The guard's lip curled, but she said nothing more, stepping aside to make way for another formidable presence. Eudora entered the cell, her dark eyes blazing with fury. She stood over her granddaughter, an imposing figure of authority, clad in black robes. "Get up," Eudora commanded, her voice dripping with disdain. Lita winced as she tried to obey, her body protesting against the sudden movement. Eudora's eyes narrowed, unsympathetic to Lita's suffering. "You stupid girl, do you have any idea what you've done?" Lita's heart raced, and she struggled to catch her breath. Despite the agony, she mustered the strength to meet her grandmother Eudora's piercing gaze. "Did they get away?" Lita asked. Eudora scoffed, her face contorting in disgust. "Yes, they did. All thanks to you." Warmth bloomed in Lita's chest. Adonis and Zack had made it to freedom. It made her suffering worth it. "Most of the men are gone," Eudora continued, "and the city is engulfed in riots. Our society is in chaos, and it's all because of one stupid little girl who couldn't appreciate the good life that had been given to her." "I know what you did," Lita spat, her voice hoarse from the strain. "Ending pregnancies and imprisoning men in order to use and abuse them." Eudora's face twisted into an expression of rage and disbelief, her eyes narrowed and her lips curled into a sneer. She stepped closer to Lita, her towering figure casting a shadow over her granddaughter. Such lies, Eudora spat. Everyone knows that the climate of the planet simply produces more women, and the men of the temple are well looked after. Lita's courage wavered, but she clenched her fists, refusing to back down from the truth. Denying it won't change the facts, Lita replied, her voice trembling slightly. I've seen the evidence, the abuse that goes on within these walls. You can't hide the truth any longer. Your stupidity has consequences, Eudora retorted, her eyes narrowing dangerously. The escape of those men puts us all at risk. You've jeopardized our way of life. Your way of life, Lita corrected, her anger intensifying despite her pain. A life built on fear and control, where love is forbidden, and people are treated as objects. Love? Eudora scoffed, her lip curling in disgust. Is that what you think this is about? Your infatuation with that breeder has clouded your judgment. Lita clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. It's not just about him, she insisted, her voice trembling with emotion as she thought of Iris, Ruth, and her mother. It's about everyone who's suffered. Bold words for someone who knows so little, Eudora snapped. You've never seen the true evil of men. My grandmother would often tell tales of what they did to her. The leaders of this planet were monsters who used women as slaves until we rose up and fought back. Generations of women fought hard to create this utopia that you so gladly just trampled. Lita's chest heaved with emotion, her heart pounding as she struggled to express the depth of her convictions. She never looked away from her grandmother's stern gaze. I can't accept a world built on suffering, Lita said. You say we've created a utopia, but how can it be a paradise when there are still people in pain? When men like Adonis are treated like animals, and women like Iris are forced to give up their children? Eudora's jaw clenched, anger blazing in her eyes like an uncontrolled fire. How dare you speak of their suffering as if it's our fault? We did what was necessary to ensure our future and protect ourselves from the cruelty of men. Is it truly worth it? Lita asked, desperation lacing her words. To punish people for things that happened before they were even born? Enough! Eudora's voice cracked like a whip. We will not allow your foolishness to destroy everything we have built. Then maybe what you've built isn't worth saving. The world seemed to hold its breath as Lita's words hung in the air, a challenge that refused to be ignored. Eudora's eyes blazed with an unquenchable fire as she stared at her granddaughter. Can't you see how twisted this society has become? Lita shouted, her voice echoing off the damp stone walls. You've turned a blind eye to the atrocities committed here, all in the name of your so-called utopia. Your insolence has no limits, Eudora seethed. You'll learn your place, or you'll face the consequences. Go ahead then, Lita challenged. Punish me for daring to defy you, but know that it won't change the truth. Eudora's nostrils flared, her gaze burning into Lita's soul as the bitter words flowed from her lips. You think you're so brave, standing up to me like this? You're nothing more than a foolish child playing at rebellion. And when your little game fails, it will be you who suffers most. Perhaps I am a fool, Lita admitted, her voice wavering but never breaking. But if fighting for other people's happiness makes me foolish, then so be it. Enough, Eudora bellowed, her voice cracking under the strain. She pointed an accusing finger at Lita, her hand trembling with the effort to maintain control. You're a disgrace, not just to our family, but to all the women who fought and sacrificed for the world we have now. Lita clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms as she struggled to maintain her composure. She looked into Eudora's eyes, seeing the storm of emotions swirling behind them. Betrayal, disappointment, and something deeper, more personal. Maybe I am, Lita whispered, but if standing up for what's right makes me a disgrace, then so be it. Eudora stared at her granddaughter, her eyes reflecting disbelief and pain. For a fleeting moment, Lita thought she detected a glimmer of understanding, a hint of doubt that suggested reconciliation might be possible. But it vanished as swiftly as it had appeared, replaced by a cold, unwavering determination. Then you're no longer my granddaughter, Eudora declared, her voice low and dangerous. I wash my hands of you, Lita. You may rot in this cell for all I care. With one final, condemning look, Eudora turned on her heel and exited the cell, the heavy door slamming shut behind her with a resounding clang that reverberated through the darkness. Lita slumped against the cold stone wall, her body convulsing with sobs as the weight of her grandmother's words pressed down on her. Several days passed, interrupted only by the occasional guard who'd push a bowl of soup into Lita's cell before disappearing again. Lita huddled in the corner, her back pressed against the cold, unforgiving metal wall. The darkness seemed to wrap around her like a shroud, amplifying her feelings of isolation and despair. Outside, distant explosions punctuated the silence, each boom sending tremors through the floor beneath her. The reverberations were a constant reminder of the chaos and danger that raged above her, leaving her heart racing with anxiety. She couldn't help but wonder if Adonis was somewhere out there, fighting for his life. "Mother, Ruth, Iris," she whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible even to herself. Happy memories of her friends and family surfaced in her mind. "Please be safe." A sudden, booming explosion shook the walls around Lita, snapping her back to the present. She listened intently, her ears straining to catch any indication of what was happening beyond the confines of her cell. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, causing her to cough and splutter, but still she listened. After many hours, the distant sounds of explosions and fighting subsided, leaving only an eerie silence in their wake. The guards also disappeared, along with all food and water. Lita's heart clenched as she realized that no one was coming for her. As the days wore on, Lita's body began to betray her. The gnawing hunger that clawed at her insides left her weak and lethargic. Her once vibrant eyes held only a flicker of the passion that had driven her to pursue Adonis, to break free from the confines of her family's expectations. "Adonis," she whispered, the name a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. Her thoughts drifted back to their stolen moments together, when his touch made her feel safe in a way nothing else ever had. "Please, find me." Despite her weakened state, Lita refused to let despair claim her completely. Each time her mind conjured up images of Adonis's strong arms enveloping her, the gentleness in his eyes, she found the strength to continue. For him, she would cling to life, even as it threatened to slip away from her grasp. "Adonis, if I don't make it out of here, just know that I'll always love you," she thought, tears streaming down her cheeks. Darkness enveloped Lita like a suffocating shroud, the inky blackness almost tangible as it pressed against her skin. The only sounds that filled the void were the distant echoes of her own ragged breaths and the relentless drip of water from a crack in the ceiling. Her cell was little more than a tomb, its cold, stone walls devoid of any comfort or solace. "Is this how it ends?" she whispered to herself. Just as despair threatened to overtake her, something caught her attention. A faint glow appeared in the corner of the dimly lit cell, its brightness like a beacon in the suffocating darkness. It was small at first, hardly distinguishable from the shadows, but Lita's eyes widened as the light grew steadily brighter, filling her with excitement and renewed hope. As the light intensified, it seemed to take on a shape, the outline of a man materializing before her very eyes. The unmistakable features of Adonis emerged from the brilliance, his strong jaw and familiar face causing her heart to race wildly in her chest. He stood there, bathed in ethereal light, looking every bit the hero she had dreamt of in her darkest moments. "Adonis!" she cried, tears forming in her eyes as she stumbled towards him, her weakened state unable to dampen the fire that ignited within her. "Is it really you?" "Shh, my love," Adonis murmured, his voice soft yet commanding as he placed his finger gently on her lips. "I have come for you." Lita's breath hitched at his touch, her heart aching with relief even amongst the pain and exhaustion. Their eyes locked, and she knew without a doubt that this was her Adonis, come to save her. "Adonis," she breathed, her voice heavy with longing. "I've missed you so much." "Let me take care of you, Lita," he replied, his voice barely more than a whisper. As his hands gently cradled her face, he leaned in and pressed his lips against hers. The connection was immediate, as if their souls were fusing together once more. Their surroundings faded away, leaving only the two of them and the relief and longing of all the months apart. Lita clung to him, tears slipping down her cheeks, her need to be near him driving away the pain and weakness of her imprisonment. "Promise me we'll never be apart again," she pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Never again," he said gently with a soft smile. "But first, let's leave this wretched place." The darkness began to recede, replaced by a light that burned brighter than any she had ever known. Bound together by fate, Lita and Adonis forged ahead, their love growing stronger with each step they took towards freedom. Thank you for listening to the Fade to Black version of Filled by Adonis by Beatrix Steam. Read the full spicy version on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. Find more spicy stories by Beatrix Steam and free ebooks at beatrixsteam.com.